Hey guys, welcome to part 8 of What If Naruto Was Adopted by Iruka. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 29. Proving Grounds. Naruto was awake well before dawn, though he made sure to keep very still and tame his racing heart before even taking a breath. It had taken a few seconds to register that he had woken up comfortably tangled with Hinata beneath his blankets, and a few seconds more to recall last night. After a minute of mimicking the deep breathing of slumber, he allowed himself to feel her there, curled up against his chest and using his arm as a pillow. It seemed that he had ended up turning towards her in the night after all. Said arm was so numb that he couldn't have moved it if he had wanted to. Hinata looked far too adorable to jostle from sleep just for his own comfort. Sure, maybe his arm might have been itching, if he had retained any feeling in it, from the bit of saliva that had undoubtedly collected from the corner of her mouth. And it was a distinct possibility that the few strands of her disheveled hair had been caught in her lips for most of the night. But she was still so damn cute that he couldn't help but lean over to plant a light kiss on her nose. She stirred and murmured at the soft contact, her eyelashes fluttering open to blink sleepily at the gray light seeping past the curtains at the foot of the bed. Just as it had him, it appeared to take a few seconds for the situation to come back to her, but unlike him she merely sighed and nestled closer. Good morning, she sighed. Morning, Naruto replied with a smirk. Sorry for waking you, but I think we should get up and ready before Iruka-sensei decides to be our alarm clock. She did color at the suggestion that they might be discovered, but still seemed none too hurried in nipping his neck and ghosting from the bedroom. Hinata lived up to her and Tenten's lofty standards for a konoha kunoichi. He didn't even hear the door click shut after she had departed. It took Naruto just minutes to prepare. Clothes were as easy as donning a fresh set, the bandages about the bottoms of his pant legs taking the most time since he was not yet practiced in wrapping them. Once his jika-tabi were pulled on and buckled securely, he retrieved his kunai holster and belt pouch, refilling both with standard supplies before securing them in place. He wasn't entirely comfortable with not being allowed anything else, but there must be a reason. Nobody would be excited about that reason when it was finally revealed, he suspected. It came as no surprise that Iruka was already in the kitchen by the time Naruto exited his room, although he made sure to school his expression to make certain that nothing was given away. It wasn't as if he had anything to hide. Not exactly, anyway. His adopted father had only cautioned about putting themselves in that kind of situation, which meant that they were allowed to at their own discretion. Back then Naruto had been embarrassed and even put off by the idea, but after experiencing a taste of it, quite literally, he was definitely coming around to it. Sort of. The whole idea of that was still foreign to him, but now at least he was willing to explore the thought some more. Maybe that was what Iruka had been warning about. Good morning, Naruto, the man said cheerily, banishing any fears that he might know what had gone on through the night. Iruka turned to greet him, and Naruto had to stifle a laugh. The Chunin was wearing a pair of fuzzy blue slippers over his bare feet, along with a set of matching pajamas complete with a lopsided sleeping cap. A jarringly pink apron and set of oven mitts completed the attire, creating a truly comical spectacle standing atop the tile floor. Good morning Iruka-sensei, Hinata giggled, stepping in beside Naruto. It seemed that she had no qualms with laughing, and so laugh Naruto did. What? Iruka asked indignantly, the tip of his nightcap seeming to bristle along with his pride. I needed a new apron and pair of oven mitts, and these were on sale. No amount of explaining or protesting would get Naruto to cease his fit of mirth until he was good and ready, which took at least a full minute. He and Hinata were very nearly holding each other up by the end of it, wiping away tears and beaming at their former instructor. You're the best, Iruka-sensei. Naruto nearly hiccuped on a chuckle while trying to get that out, but Iruka seemed to take it as sincerely as it was meant, grinning back at them and waggling a flamboyantly pink-clad hand at them. Come on you two. It's already after 6, and you need to eat a hearty breakfast before I'll let you leave here. Naruto was more than happy to comply with that. The meal was a brief but enjoyable affair, filled with light-hearted jests and Iruka's words of encouragement for the upcoming exam. Most of what he had to tell them sounded like a parent utterly confident in his children, and Naruto appreciated it all the more because of that. Don't forget your cloaks, Iruka said at last as they headed for the entry hall. The Badlands will be covered in snow right now, but I'd take the reversible ones just in case. You never know if the terrain will change, or if the exam will last long enough to allow a thaw. Naruto nodded as if he hadn't already been reaching for the indicated garment hanging on a peg beside Hinata's, throwing it over his shoulders with the white side out before clasping it. Iruka watched the heavy woolen cloth settle around him and Hinata, nodding once before stepping forward and pulling them both into a fierce hug. Good luck you two. Try not to give me a panic attack during this set of exams, will you? Yes, sensei, they mumbled in unison, hugging back just as hard. We'll all make Chunin for sure. Naruto added as he pushed back, giving Iruka a broad grin. The man's hand settled on Naruto's head and ruffled his hair fondly, the action repeated for Hinata. I know you will. Iruka swiped a tear from the corner of one eye and made a shooing gesture with both hands. Kakashi told you to be there early, remember? Go on, go on. Make me proud, you too. The last Naruto heard called from behind him as he leapt from the balcony outside. He planned to do exactly that, and more. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Looks like we weren't the only ones looking to get a head start, Naruto observed as he and Hinata approached the main gate. In truth, he had expected at least one or two teams to be out this early, but not every member of the so-called Konoha 12. He thought that name was a little funny, especially considering that Team Guy had been lumped in with the newer graduating class, but he supposed every village had a particularly strong group of genin on hand. So far only Team Guy could give him and his teammates a run for their money, he thought, but it had been a long time since he had seen the rest in action. He landed hand in hand with Hinata by the guard post, and they both waved to Kotetsu and Izumo before looking around more closely. Every member of Team 10 was present, even Shikamaru, surprisingly enough for this hour. Guy seemed to be admonishing his team about the upcoming exam, though with all of the hand gestures and poses it seemed to be more of a lively pep talk than a cautioning. Sakura, Hiba, and Shino were just passing through the gate when the pink-haired Kunoichi stopped and turned abruptly, staring off towards the main street. It only took a moment to realize why, and Naruto couldn't help but smirk when he saw what she was now staring at. Sasuke stood with Haku where the broad central avenue opened up to the entrance square, and it wasn't difficult to discern their topic of conversation despite nobody being close enough to overhear. Sasuke was scowling off to one side, and even at that distance Naruto could see a bit of red in his friend's face. Haku was leaning towards him intently, wearing a concerned expression and speaking very fast if his lips gave any indication. It didn't appear to be an argument, exactly, although at the very least it was some kind of disagreement. A whole minute passed without a single word from Sasuke, and then Haku suddenly seemed to break off mid-sentence and leap at the other boy, tackling him to the ground in a very forceful hug. Naruto snickered. He's probably as worried for Sasuke as Iruka is for us, Hinata said with no small amount of compassion. Naruto had long since come to realize that she always empathized with people, although it wasn't difficult for him to understand where Haku was coming from either, especially after a few weeks, and one particularly intense evening, of worrying himself. He nodded solemnly, giving her hand another squeeze just before Sasuke approached, dusting himself off and grumbling under his breath. He wanted me to promise not to do anything reckless, the dour youth muttered. He continued when Naruto only raised an eyebrow, and Hinata smiled fondly at Haku over Sasuke's shoulder. I didn't agree. If there's anywhere we might need to be reckless, it's at these exams. No reason to make a promise I'm not going to keep. He trailed off, and the slight tint of a blush that had been present since his approach darkened noticeably. Oh, for the love of Sasuke-kun. Sakura's voice called from their right. Naruto couldn't help but laugh. The way his friend sighed and resignedly shoved his hands into his pockets would have been enough to bring on a grin, but knowing what was in store for the other boy now nearly had him tittering. We'll let you walk with Sakura-san, Naruto said lightly, patting his friend's shoulder. See you at the rendezvous, Sasuke. The glower he received at the ill-concealed jibe was priceless. That wasn't very nice, Naruto, Hinata chided as they passed beyond the walls. She sounded half serious, and half like she wanted to break into a fit of giggles. He noted the corners of her lips twitching upwards in the beginnings of an amused smile, but was unable to comment further. Movement in his peripheral vision had him tensed immediately, and one hand had already reached for a kunai before his eyes belayed any reason for caution, or so he hoped. May we walk with you, Uzumaki Naruto? Gaara stepped out of the long morning shadows and onto the broad road, his flat green eyes focused on Naruto. Kankuro and Temari were flanking him as usual, although neither looked as agitated as they usually did. As far as Naruto could tell, they must have been idling beneath the trees just outside of the gate, waiting to catch him as he left for the next exam. That thought caused a bit of uneasiness to creep in, but he shook it off without a second thought. Gaara might still be a little creepy, and his siblings were jerks sometimes, but they seemed somehow different. Despite the presence of his sand gourd, Gaara's step seemed lighter, and the other two no longer appeared wary of their brother's every move. He offered a casual shrug and a grin, just like he might to any friend. Sure. We're just heading to the second exam. He blinked as they fell in step beside him and Hinata, an unexpected thought forming on the tail end of his greeting. Are you three competing? That seemed impossible considering the circumstances involving Suna and the previous exams, but the way they were dressed and geared told him otherwise. Gaara simply nodded without looking at him, but Temari took up the explanation in her brother's stead. The Hokage has been talking to an envoy from our village for a while now. I don't know all of the details, but they agreed that the sand was manipulated by Orochimaru and isn't to be held entirely responsible for what happened. I'm sure we'll be paying reparations, she added quickly, likely in response to Hinata's pursed lips. And artisans have been arriving from our country to help with rebuilding. But since the Kazekage was assassinated and impersonated, and it's come to light that Orochimaru was behind the plot all along, I guess they're actually working on forging an alliance between our villages. An alliance? Naruto blinked. Alliances weren't unheard of between hidden villages, but Iruka had explained the circumstances revolving around Konoha and Suna. The daimyo of the Land of Wind had apparently been cutting off funding for the hidden sand, and instead using shinobi from the Leaf to accomplish missions. That bitterness had supposedly been a major factor in the decision to invade Konoha, and Naruto couldn't imagine that an alliance would be popular with either village. After theirs had been so recently attacked, the attitude towards Suna wasn't positive in the least. And after years of being spurned only to suffer a defeat and be forced to pay reparations, the Sand couldn't be thrilled about the prospect either. He said as much, and it was Kankuro who replied this time. It's far from an even coalition, the older boy said gruffly, shifting the strap across his chest that held the puppet on his back. It's more of a tentative partnership, and your side has more to offer than ours. And, rightly so, I guess, he added after a moment's pause, though it came grudgingly. But you're wrong about our village, mostly, anyway. Some of it's true, but most are more eager to see peace and prosperity than revenge. Concord between our villages will be a boon to both economies due to the new trade and lowered risk of caravans being attacked along the routes. Other nations will be less likely to attack openly allied villages too, since assaulting one means provoking the other as well. So we get increased security to focus on rebuilding. When you think about it, Naruto began slowly, furrowing his brow as he did just that, there aren't really any disadvantages to allying with each other, are there? Kankuro shrugged noncommittally, but Temari gave a firm nod. Other nations could see it as a threat and band together as well, Hinata put in, earning her surprised looks from the Sand siblings. Even Gaara's gaze flicked to her for an instant. She went on with only the slightest flush, though Naruto felt the pressure on his hand increase. It's what caused the Second Shinobi World War, in a way. When factions begin forming in one land, others band together for protection, and just the tension can spark conflicts that can lead to war. Even Naruto was looking at her now, and he was sure that his features communicated as much surprise as he felt. Hinata was smart. Hell, she was more intelligent than anybody their age that he knew, barring Shikamaru, but he hadn't known that she was a history buff. She went right on as if nobody was looking at her, staring intently at nothing as they walked on. There's also the threat of espionage. As villages begin to trust one another more, they can let their guard down and reveal too much, and one side could take advantage. Then there's the fact that dealing in a friendly fashion with one village can ostracize another that you used to trade with because of existing animosity, and she trailed off then, apparently having realized that she had been nearly lecturing about politics to a small crowd of abashed onlookers. Oh, I do think the treaty is a good idea, though. Yeah, as too, Tamari said weakly, eyeing Hinata up and down as if seeing her for the first time. That's all I guess that's all true, but I'm sure the higher-ups will figure all of that out. I think it's safe to say that we're allies now, and better off for it. Yeah, definitely, Naruto agreed, though his mind was already straying from the topic at hand. What about you, Gaara? What did they decide about you and Shukaku, and that new seal Jiraiya put in place? And how do you feel now? My village was eager to have their weapon back, Gaara responded in his normal monotone. Even if that weapon no longer functions to the same capacity, it is far from impotent. He raised a hand, and a trickle of sand flowed from the gourd to swirl about his fingers. Sunagakure still retains its biju, however unavailable it may be, and they are more glad than they let on to have Shukaku's influence sealed away. I feel. He paused, allowing the sand to coalesce in his palm into what appeared to be a tiny statue of a kneeling woman. I feel rested and at peace. These feelings are strange to me, but I believe I will grow to be fond of them. Fondness. Gaara seemed to like to think quite a bit before speaking, and now the silence stretched on to the point of awkwardness. We're glad to have him back, Tamari put in with a small smile, laying a hand on her younger brother's arm. Gaara blinked and looked up at her, clearly confused, which only made her smile widen. Even Kankuro was smirking a little, though he seemed to be trying not to. I'm glad you're doing better, Naruto said simply, sharing a grin with the rest. I'd like to be friends with you, all of you, and Suna too. I don't really like the idea of being enemies with any village, even if we can't all get along. There'd be no need for shinobi if that were the case. He laughed, but for some reason couldn't put any feeling behind it. Hinata's fingers gripped tightly between his own, and they lapsed into a more comfortable silence then, if not an entirely serene one. The quiet persisted for the remainder of their short journey, even after they turned off of the road and took to the trees in order to make better time. It was difficult to hold a conversation while jumping between branches anyway. It was a leisurely pace and used a minimal amount of chakra, but it still took them the 10-kilometer distance in a little over 20 minutes. They landed as a group where the trees suddenly stopped at the edge of a shallow ravine, along the bottom of which a tent had been erected. It was more of a valley than a true canyon, but as Naruto looked out at the stark landscape beyond it, he could tell that it was just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. Oi! You five! A woman barked from below. Quit gawking and get down here to register if you plan to participate. Don't dawdle, or I'll use you as target practice. A loud guffaw echoed up to them, and Naruto beamed back down. He had always liked Anko, even if she was a bit weird. They weren't the first to arrive, although Naruto hadn't anticipated they would be with the time spent dawdling around the gates. Even so, there were only two other teams present, and both seemed to stir from their places of rest when he and the others landed in front of the tent. One team of genin was from the hidden rain judging by their headbands, and each of the members appeared to be wearing a sour expression that did not fall too far short of baleful. The two boys and girl casually went back to their own conversation after only a second's pause to sneer. The other group held three blank-faced youths, all female, sporting Hitai of the hidden cloud, although it was obvious at a glance that their flat expressions were all for show. Their eyes practically glittered as Naruto and his party passed by on their way to the tent, and he could feel their combined killing intent from the dozen or so meters away. Those were no run-of-the-mill kunoichi. Competition seems interesting, Tamari commented wryly, giving the trio of girls a hard look before sniffing dismissively. At least it might be more of a challenge than the last exam's cakewalk. Neither of those teams are weak, Kankuro muttered. It looks like each village took care in selecting genin this time around. I wouldn't be surprised to find a Chunin-level shinobi among the teams, maybe even an actual Chunin. Naruto looked at him askance, but the older boy only shrugged. It's been known to happen when one village has a particular grudge or agenda, or so I've heard. They can throw a jonin at us for all I care, Naruto said dismissively. He chose not to see Hinata's raised eyebrow, the one that she used to silently, though not unkindly, call out his confidence when it strayed too close to hubris. Well, this wasn't being overly prideful. They had proven that they could defeat Kakashi, and he was an elite among the higher ranks of shinobi. Still, she would probably like it better if he turned it into a compliment of somebody else instead of bragging. I mean, I know you three could handle that, and I'm sure we'd manage. Hinata's eyebrow went down, and he thought that he saw the hint of a knowing, amused twinkle behind those white eyes. Gaara joined his siblings in a curt nod, not able to say more as they had reached the tent opening. Well, if it isn't the destructive duo, Anko whistled, giving Naruto and Gaara a once-over. Naruto tensed, and he saw Gaara's eyes narrow slightly out of the corner of his own. The kunoichi barked a laugh and showed them her palms in a placating gesture. Just a joke, kids, that's all water under the bridge now, eh? It's good to see the two of you getting along, as a matter of fact. She smacked Naruto's back good-naturedly, though stopped short of doing the same to Gaara as if thinking better of the idea. Where's the grumpy kid? Sasuke, right. Can't sign up without your full team. You three can go on in, she continued, addressing the siblings. He'll be here soon, Naruto muttered, trying not to glare at the proctor. Honestly, enough people were more than upset about what had happened during the previous exams, both regarding the two Jinchuriki and the conflict between hidden villages. He knew that Anko just had a weird sense of humor, but it still rankled a little for her to bring it up so casually. Is that him, with the pink-haired girl hanging all over him? She asked brightly, grinning up at the ravine's rim. Sure enough, when Naruto turned to look he could clearly make out Sasuke standing on the ridge line with Sakura pressed against his side so tightly that she might have been sewn on. Hinata clicked her tongue, as if the sound alone was reprimand enough for such antics in public. The sound drew his attention, and he was just able to see the last veins receding around her eyes. The pair above was far enough off that their specific antics couldn't be told with regular eyesight, but her eyes were far from ordinary. Same thing as with Haku, probably, Naruto said with a shrug. The exam will be dangerous for both of them, right? Hinata favored him with a small smile, which he returned with a self-conscious one of his own. He tried to think about how other people felt, but it didn't come nearly as naturally as it did for her. I hate you guys, Sasuke muttered darkly, appearing next to them in a flicker of motion. Did you really have to leave me back there with her? Don't you like her? Naruto asked curiously, watching as Team 8 arrived and joined Sakura by a rocky outcrop. It didn't make much sense to him that Sasuke could like somebody, well, two somebodies, and be so annoyed by them all of the time. Naruto was beginning to think that his friend just found everybody annoying, except for Hinata and himself, of course. She talks a lot, and as too, forward. Sasuke rolled his eyes at Hinata when she stifled a giggle. She is. At least Haku doesn't. His teeth actually clicked shut in his haste to cut off the thought, and his scowl did little to offset his growing flush. Hinata did let a laugh escape then, and Naruto tittered as well. Enough lollygagging you three, Anko said crisply, clapping her hands together. Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro were already out and gathered off to one side, each holding a backpack that they had not gone in with. In with you before I go tell that Sakura girl that you've been mooning at her. She gave Sasuke a wicked grin. He paled slightly, coughed, and with apparent nonchalance led the way into the tent. Naruto shared a conspiratorial look with Hinata before following after his friend, deciding that perhaps Anko wasn't so bad after all. The canvas flap closed, leaving them in a sizable open space lit by torches at each corner and a brazier at the center, though the last was presumably more for warmth than light. Two Chunin stood just a few steps inside, one wearing a bored expression over his bland features while the other only stared at them with one hard eye, the other, or lack thereof, hidden behind an eye patch. Despite the puckered scar trailing down from the patch and pulling the corner of his mouth into a permanent grimace, he seemed to attempt to smile at them before turning towards a pile of rucksacks. Names? The nondescript man asked, his monotone voice adding to his appearance of plainness. Uzumaki Naruto. Hyuga Hinata. Uchiha Sasuke. The man blinked, glanced up at them, then shook his head. He made no further indication of his displeasure, but Naruto bristled at the subtle disapproval. The silent pressure of Hinata's hand was all that stopped him from commenting on it. That would be Team 7, then. Here are your supplies, the aggravatingly insipid Chunin said with a lazy gesture towards his partner. The scarred shinobi was holding the straps of 3 packs that looked identical to those the Suna siblings had been examining outside. He handed one to each of them, saying nothing, but offering that odd half-smile at each of them in turn. Naruto grinned back appreciatively, glad that at least one of the two was nice. I'll need you to sign next to your names, the other droned, offering his clipboard to Hinata first. It's a standard consent form, just like the ones you signed before the second exam last time. By signing you agree to release both the proctors and konoha from any liabilities should you die during the exam. His voice, apart from sounding naturally dull, carried with it the impression that he was resigned to repeat that same line far more times than he would have liked. Hinata took the proffered clipboard and small brush with a smile no different than the one she had offered the other man, applying her signature with a delicate and precise hand before passing both items to Naruto. She really did seem to think the best of almost everybody. He and Sasuke quickly signed their names, his own in a blocky but neat enough hand while his friends nearly rivaled Hinata's for precision, though with a noticeably sharper hand and added flourish. The rest will be explained to you later. You're dismissed. Wouldn't have killed him to be more cordial, Sasuke muttered after they had exited. You're one to talk, Naruto teased, leading the way to a small boulder that was on the opposite side of the tent from the Suna team. The exam had begun, as far as he was concerned, and they were adversaries now. He was kind of a jerk, though. He was just doing his job, Hinata said patiently. This had been a matter of course for her ever since she had become more confident, mediating between her friends and trying to get them to see the best in people. It worked. Sometimes. He can do his job and be less condescending. That look he gave us was little less than rude. Sasuke wasn't about to be turned from his mood so easily, and so Hinata only shrugged before adding a final thought. We don't know him. He might be like that for a reason. She left the implication unspoken. Maybe somebody close to him had died during the last exam. Their role in the battle was well known by all, and so it wasn't entirely uncommon these days for them to receive second, and none too kind, glances. Well, let's see what they gave us. We weren't told not to open them, so it must be okay. Naruto spared a look towards the 3 other teams just in case, finding that the rain and the clouds packs had the rumpled looks of being opened, and Suna was currently rummaging through their own. Well, Tamari and Kankura were, and Gaara seemed just to be watching. Some things didn't change, it seemed. The contents of each pack were identical, down to the very last soldier pill. 2 had been included in every one. There were 2 filled canteens, a large square tarp, a flare, and 8 packages of standard shinobi field rations in each backpack. The meals were labeled simply as meal or supplement, with 6 of the former and 2 of the latter. All in all, it didn't appear to be anything remarkable, and they were just beginning to discuss the purpose when Team 10 sauntered over. Yo, Shikamaru drawled as he approached, stifling a yawn. I guess you 3 have figured out what the next exam is by now. He nodded to their packs, then shifted the strap of the one on his shoulder with a grimace. I figured that the second exam would be another survival test, but I can't see another goal like we had last time. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. What do you mean? He asked, glancing to each of his teammates to see if they understood. They shook their heads. It seemed that Shikamaru had worked out more than they had been able to in a more limited time frame. The other boy's own eyebrow lifted. It seemed that he had expected more from them, but he gave no further sign of it as he started to explain. It's clear that these are the only supplies we'll be given. There's no other tent set up, and nowhere to hide anything else that might be considered an objective, unless they brought scrolls to summon other items with. He considered that a moment, scratching behind one ear and staring off into the distance before shaking his head. So if this is it, it's a straight survival test where we'll be pitted against one another, and either drop out before we die or fight over supplies until the time limit is reached. There won't be much to scavenge or hunt out there, so we'll probably be forced to take each other's food to survive. He stated that all in a matter-of-fact manner, as if he was discussing the weather. In truth, it was very similar to having to steal scrolls from one another, but this seemed different in some way to Naruto. That seems wrong, Naruto said, wrinkling his nose in distaste. If we had an objective to shoot for, then I'd be all for it, but if we're just supposed to beat each other and steal food. Seems a bit savage, Sasuke remarked, eyeing his own satchel as if seeing it for the first time. I get how a real fight for survival could test our resolve and push us mentally as well as physically, but there should be more elements to make this less cruel. Hinata finished for him, and then went on to surprise them. But not any more so than the last time, I think. Alternative objective or no, we're still expected to seek out and fight one another. This is just more honest and straightforward. However we feel about it, it is more efficient in testing our skills and willingness to be shinobi. Shikamaru considered her for a time, then nodded thoughtfully. I guess so. Still as troublesome as last time. At least the first exam wasn't as boring, Ino huffed, striding up behind her teammate with Choji in tow. That stupid written test was easy compared to this time. What happened in the first exam? Kakashi-sensei didn't have time to tell us yesterday. He left out the reason why that was. Aside from the fact that Kakashi had instructed them not to, they had agreed to keep it as a secret in order to veil their strength relative to other teams. If people learned that they had beaten the infamous copy ninja, even if it had taken all three of them, it could cause problems. It was a maze, Choji crunched through a mouthful of chips. We had to go through and solve puzzles and stuff. I ran out of snacks halfway through, he added in a serious tone. Snacks were always important to him and his stamina, or so he claimed. It wasn't very difficult, Ino said with a too casual shrug. A flat look from Shikamaru deflated her a bit, and he took over the explanation without too long a pause. They had a giant maze set up with obstacles designed to test our teamwork. Nothing dangerous, only a few things made to look treacherous, and some big puzzles that required all of us to work together to solve. It sounded kind of interesting to Naruto, or at least more involved than the first exam they had taken before. Anyway, it was challenging, or at least would be for groups with poor cohesion or really poor problem-solving skills. Only 17 teams made it through. That's not very many compared to last time, Sasuke mused, earning him a shrug in response. Ino gave him what Naruto suspected was her most winning smile, but it seemed to have no effect on him whatsoever. I expect that they wanted to make certain that there were no preliminary matches this year. Between the last test and this one's apparent design, I'd be willing to bet we don't see more than 4 or 5 teams get through. Naruto nodded. That made sense enough, trying to limit the teams that got through to the very best right off the bat. There had been a number of extremely weak teams last time, and they had quickly gotten themselves defeated or killed. Whittling them down off the bat before a forced survival test would be the easiest path to a third exam clear of preliminaries. It still seemed kind of harsh to him, but if all of the villages had agreed on it, then there was nothing to be done. I expect to see you 3 at the finals, Naruto said jovially, extending a fist to Shikamaru. The other boy blinked at it for a second, then smirked and rapped his knuckles against Naruto's. Choji did the same with a friendly smile, but Ino only sniffed, apparently still feeling the sting of being ignored by the object of her affections. Alright, that's everybody. Enko boomed over the buzz of conversation. Gather round over here, it's nearly 8. Here we go, Naruto said quietly, shouldering his pack and retaking Hinata's hand. She nodded while still facing ahead, then extended her free hand to Sasuke. He glanced at her, then spared a look towards where Team 8 had gathered. With a sigh he clapped his palm against hers and held on as they moved back towards the tent. Enko stood in front of the canvas opening, surveying the gathering genin with a look of mild impatience. She held a long scroll between her fingers and was tapping it rhythmically against the palm of her other hand. It was the scroll containing all of the participants' names, Naruto realized. He got the feeling that she would have been watching the seconds tick by had she been wearing a watch. It's about time, she barked when the last team crowded around. The group from Kumo had made a point to appear unhurried. Now, as most of you have likely guessed by now, this exam will be fairly straightforward. Each of you have been given supplies that will last you for 2 days while out in the Badlands. You will be expected to survive out there for 6 days. Now, for those of you who participated in the previous exam, there will be a key difference from here on out that was not present before. That got Naruto's attention, and he could almost feel the others shifting and tensing around him. Nobody liked surprises when it came to life and death scenarios. If you decide to forfeit at any time, you may do so without penalty to your team. She allowed that message to sink in for a few seconds, and Naruto took full advantage to allow his mind to race through possibilities. If an individual could drop out without disqualifying his or her team, then it meant that anybody lacking confidence could leave as soon as the test began, giving the remainder of their team a supply advantage, yet also leaving them one person down. It added a new dynamic that could give certain teams a type of advantage from the outset, or allow participants to leave if they became too injured to go on. Enko continued after a few seconds, giving voice to what most of them had likely been considering. The flares included in your supplies are for that purpose. I suggest keeping them on your person instead of with everything else, in case your packs get taken and you're still alive afterwards. The area in which you will be confined includes most of the Badlands north of here, within a barrier that will be held up during the whole of the 6-day period. If any genin is suspected of trying to leave the area by force or without having signaled a desire to forfeit, they will be incapacitated and disqualified, as will the rest of their team. She paused again, trying to make eye contact with everyone present before going on. We have taken extensive precautions to ensure that there is no foul play or outside interference with this exam as there was last time. The bulk of our peacekeepers and off-duty shinobi will be at high alert for the duration of these exams, both tasked with watching you and watching for potential outside threats. Rest assured, we will not allow anything to go amiss. Lastly, we have set up 2 oases within the perimeter. These locations have fresh water and a small amount of additional supplies within them, enough to see one team to the end if they manage to find and secure them. The whole zone is 14 kilometers across, and these havens are small and hidden, but they do provide an additional objective and point of strategy to work with. That is all. It's up to you to determine how to make it to day 6. This exam will end at noon on the 6th day, 148 hours after you are released, which will be in approximately 30 minutes. Good luck. With that she turned, the wind whipping her long beige coat as she began assigning chunin to take teams to their starting points. Looks like there is a little more to it, Naruto murmured to his friends while they waited for their proctor to be assigned. With Hinata's eyes, I think we could find one of those oases pretty easy and just take it easy for a few days. What do you think? Hinata nodded, though her lips were compressed slightly as if she was thinking worried thoughts. We're stronger than most of the other teams, Sasuke put in, scanning the thinning crowd with his Sharingan. Of the ones we're familiar with, I'd say only Team Guy and maybe Gaara's team might be able to keep up with us. The others are wildcards, but we know how strong we are compared to even the best genin. I say we stay out in the open, avoid fights with Team Guy and those Sand siblings, but try to eliminate as many others as we can. Naruto shrugged noncommittally, not really in favor of one or the other. He knew that Sasuke wasn't being cocky, he felt the same way. Confidence was different than arrogance, Iruka had told him once. I think we should do both, Hinata suggested, her own Kekkei Genkai activated and being used to examine the competition. She would be able to tell if any of them possessed any special weapons or strange tools on them. Judging by how much they changed this time around, it's possible that we might not have a full month before the finals this time. I think we should locate an oasis early, but use it as a base of operations where we can rest when not hunting other teams. No killing unless we have to, she put in, giving both of her teammates a stern glare. Naruto and Sasuke both nodded without hesitation. Unnecessary killing wasn't something any of them were interested in. When we defeat a team, we'll use one of their flares to signal their forfeit, take their supplies and leave. Agreed. They were all in accord on that point as well, of course. In short order they were being led to their starting position by the one-eyed shinobi from earlier. He still said nothing, only motioned for them to follow before springing nimbly up the slope of the ravine opposite the one they had descended. They traveled about 3 kilometers before making a sharp turn, stopping after another kilometer where they met another shinobi who was sitting cross-legged on the hard ground. A scroll was unraveled in front of him, upon which an elaborate design of jutsu shiki had been prepared. The man seemed to be concentrating, though on what Naruto couldn't tell. Their guide put a finger to his lips to command silence, and then they waited. 20 minutes seemed like much longer, a time when you had nothing to do but wait. Naruto sat with his teammates, performing a more advanced chakra exercise that Kakashi had taught them only recently. Sasuke began by exhaling into his palm, creating a small flickering flame that hovered just above his skin. He offered it to Hinata, who reached for the fire and trickled her own chakra into it until more of hers maintained the technique than Sasuke's. After only a few seconds, the little light was now floating over her palm, and she moved it carefully towards Naruto. Even after years of practice, he wasn't as accomplished at such fine chakra control, and several times the flame wavered dangerously. Whereas his friends could easily extinguish the fire without being careful, he ran more risk of feeding it far too much chakra and letting it run out of control. More than once he had walked away from this training with a singed hand, as did the unfortunate partner that had passed it to him. He tried not to notice Hinata smiling at him as he concentrated. For some reason she liked to watch him when he was focusing on something. After a much longer time than the initial transfer, Naruto got control of the flame, sighing as he removed it from Hinata's care. "It's time," the Chunin said gruffly after the 21st round. Naruto clenched his fist around the flame to extinguish it before it flared up from his loss of concentration, then got to his feet with the others. The other ninja's eyes were open now, and a blue-white barrier had risen in front of him directly over the scroll. It extended out of sight to either direction, maintaining a height of about 10 meters while dipping down into each crevasse that it came across. As far as Naruto could tell, it was unbroken despite the rough terrain. "I will create a hole for you to pass through," the man on the ground said, nodding to his left. "You have 1 minute now. Be ready. I will only open it for a few seconds." "Ready?" Naruto asked quietly, shifting his feet on the cold rock. Sasuke grunted in the affirmative, and Hinata squeezed his hand by way of response. He grinned. It was time to prove themselves again, but this time they were far more prepared. "Go." The bottom of the barrier bent upwards into an arch, creating a space just tall and wide enough for them to pass through one at a time. Naruto surged forward without a second thought, speeding through the opening with Sasuke and Hinata on his heels. The second exam had begun. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The landscape was more or less what they had anticipated from the first sighting above the base camp, but noticeably more barren than expected. With a name like the Badlands, they had assumed it would be cold and desolate, but not nearly so scoured as to reveal no signs of life. As Naruto led his teammates across the cold rock, not even the cry of a crow or skittering of a lizard broke the stillness around them. Light patches of snow covered a few ridgelines, and even more had accumulated in the ravines where sunlight never touched. It was an eerie, empty place, empty, save for the presence of 16 other teams of genin. The first half-hour passed without incident as Naruto and his friends searched for water. The same logic that had driven them to find a stream during the last exam applied here. In any survival test, the ones who secured a source of water secured their own longevity. With this in mind, they set to searching each shallow valley and cleft, knowing that even the barest trickle water would need to pass through one of them. They each sent out a shadow clone to serve as outriders, instructed to spiral outward in different directions to both aid in the search and warn of an incoming enemy. Finally, Naruto sighed, touching down at the bottom of a particularly deep gully. The sky was overcast, hiding the bulk of the sun's light, and the steep walls of the canyon made it even darker below. A tiny rivulet cut its way through the center of the narrow space, little pieces of ice appearing regularly as the water gurgled by. It wasn't much, but it was more than enough for their purposes. "Want to hang out here for a bit and use more clones to search for the oasis?" "Fine by me," Sasuke said, dropping his pack and removing both of his canteens. He set them down and crossed his fingers in the clone seal, creating a copy of himself that started off its existence staring far too intently at Hinata. He rolled his eyes and punched the clone's jaw, which caused it to disappear in a puff of smoke mere seconds after it had been formed. "I hate those things," he muttered before making another. This one seemed more normal, thankfully. "East," he said tersely. You shouldn't be mean to your clones, Sasuke. Naruto tisked as Sasuke's clone sprinted out of sight. They're part of you, you know. They're physical manifestations of my chakra, unfortunately imbued with some insignificant part of my consciousness. They're tools, like all other jutsu, only more annoying than others. The other boy's grumbling made Naruto smirk, but Hinata frowned thoughtfully after the clone before making her own and asking it to go west. He summoned two and instructed them to go north and south. One replied with a salute and militaristic discipline while the other seemed to drag its feet and sigh every other step. Well, maybe they were a little obnoxious sometimes, but they were too useful to stop using. It took a few minutes to drain and refill the bottles. They each drank one and dumped out the other, opting to replace it with the fresh icy water. Iruka and Kakashi both always said that really cold water was better for you, though they had been vague on why that was. Still, it tasted better, and the crispness made Naruto feel more alert. Maybe there was something to it after all. Not 5 minutes later, when they were all settling back near the pseudo-cliff's base, Sasuke suddenly sat up straight, staring eastward. My clone was destroyed, but I didn't see what happened to it. There wasn't any time for it to sense or react to anything. That was unsettling, but not so unsettling as Hinata mimicking Sasuke a breath later. A little less than 2 kilometers west, mine too. All I saw was a bright light, then it was gone. Naruto could feel the hairs on the back of his neck trying to stand up, but he brushed off the feeling that was coming on. It was just a coincidence, surely. Unfortunately, the odds of that possibility lengthened significantly when one of his own clones was crushed less than a kilometer to the south. One of mine was destroyed just now, he said, getting to his feet and drawing one of the kunai that Jiraiya had given him. South. I didn't see the attacker either, but my clone was just smashed, like somebody dropped a huge rock on it. He wrinkled his nose, trying to think on their options. His serious bunshin was still running north unimpeded, which meant that it was clear in that direction for the time being. At least 3 teams knew that they were nearby, and it was safe to assume that their identities were revealed while they knew nothing of their adversaries. Worst case scenario, Sasuke began, giving voice to Naruto's own thoughts. We have 3 teams heading for our location right now, and they'll be here in minutes. Best case, they don't have sensory or tracking types with them, so they can't pinpoint our location and will all pass us by. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, Hinata recited. That's what Kakashi-sensei always says. What should we do? Naruto could tell that she had plenty of thoughts on the topic herself, but she looked to him for the first opinion. Sasuke was watching him as well, his stance outwardly casual to anybody who didn't know him. Now's as good a time as any to show everybody how strong we are, Naruto shrugged. Enko-sensei said that we're being monitored at all times, so we can at least expect somebody's watching us right now. That made him feel a bit uneasy, but he told himself that it was just the proctors. They were there as a safeguard and to judge their performance. If it's just one team, I know we won't have any problems. Well, unless it's Team Guy or Gaara. I don't think they'd try to fight us anyway, for the same reasons we don't want to fight them. Sasuke and Hinata both nodded. This was something they had discussed as well. Even if it's more than one team, I think we should take them on. Unless they look like they're really strong, anyway. Otherwise we can always retreat north. Sounds good, Sasuke said coolly, sitting back down and making a show of stretching lazily against the ridge's slope. We'll each take one team if they come at us. I think we should be able to handle that. Probably, Hinata put in, lowering herself back down as well. I'm going to keep my Byakugan active, and I'll have my chakra web ready in case anybody tries to surprise us with a long-range jutsu. Sasuke, can you be ready with Stone Prison? He finished for her, lacing his fingers behind his head and closing his eyes. Got it. She smiled and shook her head, clearly amused. Want me to put up a sensory gate? I can't make it as good as you can, but I can make a really big one, Naruto offered, plopping down beside his friends. Appearing unconcerned was a good strategy, he realized, and one that Sasuke took naturally too. Hinata furrowed her brow while the veins beside her eyes became defined with the activation of her bloodline ability, then shook her head again. That one works well indoors because we can hide it inside the walls, but out here people could see it easily. I've been trying to find a sensory type barrier that can be put into the ground and activate when something moves on top of it, but the only ones I could find while researching involved pre-positioned tags. Naruto blinked, grinned, and impulsively leaned over to plant a quick kiss on Hinata's lips. She flushed and glanced aside at Sasuke, but he appeared to still be feigning sleep. That action only made Naruto laugh. Hinata was far too cute for her own good. We can work on developing one later. Your eyes are all we need right now anyway. Sasuke looks like he trusts you enough to take a nap while you're on watch. Sasuke grunted noncommittally in response, and Hinata smiled again. She reached out and gave Naruto's hand a squeeze before settling into a cross-legged position, her hands resting on her knees and ready to speed into seals at a moment's notice. Naruto, Kurama began, his tone somewhat cautious. There is something watching us. Something. What do you mean? Hinata would be able to see anybody before they could see us. She can see further than Neji, even. I'm not sure what it is, but it doesn't feel human, and it's staying carefully hidden. It feels familiar somehow, but that is all I can tell you. You wouldn't be able to sense it if you tried. It's a different type of particularity. Naruto frowned, unnoticed by his friends. He was used to the Kyuubi being mysterious sometimes, but this was a whole new level of cryptic. Still, it was clear that the fox wasn't sure what it was, or he would have explained better. Alright, I'll keep a lookout. There's no reason to tell Sasuke and Hinata, right? It'd just make them worry about something they can't do anything about. Probably not, Kurama admitted. Naruto could feel him shift as if uncomfortable, which was an odd sensation because it wasn't precisely felt. It was more of a knowledge that, within his cage, the Kyuubi was moving around with a touch of restlessness. Those tidbits were part of their connection, and he had largely gotten used to them, but sometimes Kurama's emotions could get tangled with his own. It normally only happened in times of high urgency, but Naruto began to feel a bit uneasy. He told himself that it was because Kurama rarely got concerned, and thus it was a normal reaction to be worried about it, but he couldn't be entirely certain. The team from Omegakure is approaching from the south, fast, Hinata said, breaking Naruto's train of thought. She continued before he could open his mouth to ask how far they were, her voice becoming more intent by the word. Kumogakure is coming from the northeast, and. She stopped, her eyes tightening visible. Team 10 is coming from the west. Cautiously, but they're coming. Shikamaru and them. Huh. Naruto mused, trying to keep his tone light. He didn't fancy the idea of facing his former classmates, at least not so early, but if they were coming then they knew what they were getting into. Ino's a sensory type, so she'll know we're here for sure. I'm kind of hard to miss even if I do my best to suppress my chakra. The other two groups. He shrugged, then grinned wolfishly. Prepare for the worst, right? Want to each take one team? Sasuke offered, sitting up and stretching again. Hinata stole a reproving look at him before going back to her sentry duty. She didn't appear overly worried, but Naruto could tell that she was concentrating on forming a strategy based on what little they knew of the two foreign teams. What? He asked, his eyes switching from their normal flat black to the red of his Sharingan. We wanted to prove how strong we are, right? If we can beat Kakashi-sensei together, we should be able to take on 3 genin individually. What if there really are chunin hidden among them? Hinata asked, still staring at nothing while she used her Kekkei Genkai to watch their incoming opponents. You felt the killing intent from those two teams, too. They're not going to be pushovers. I'll take the team from the cloud, Sasuke responded evenly. You didn't see any weapons or scrolls on them, meaning they're probably more reliant on ninjutsu or taijutsu. The team from the hidden rain looks like it'd be right up your alley. At least one is a weapons user judging by his nunchaku, and if that girl with elbow and shin guards isn't a taijutsu specialist then I need my eyes checked. You'd be best in close combat with more than one opponent. You did hold off Saken and Uken by yourself, didn't you? I had help, Hinata protested, but Naruto could tell that she was considering the idea. I guess Naruto would be our best option against the Ino-Shika-Cho combination. He's more than a match for Choji's brawling, and I doubt he'd let himself get hit with Ino's mind transfer jutsu. I dunno. Naruto glanced around, taking stock of their surroundings and not liking what he saw. It was dark there, with large rocks and outcrops all along the bottom of the ravine that would provide long shadows for Shikamaru to use. I've never seen anybody break out of Shikamaru's shadow imitation technique, and there are a lot of shadows around. When Shikamaru caught Dosu in the Forest of Death, it looked like he was struggling to break free. He was quavering and straining against the jutsu, at least, meaning he was in control of his muscles. It's just a guess, but I think you might be able to break out of it with brute force, Hinata suggested. Sasuke chuckled. We know he's got plenty of that. Naruto gave him a flat look, then shrugged. Sounds good to me. If any of us gets into trouble, though, just throw an exploding tag into the air. It's not a flare, so it won't signal a forfeit, and we'll be able to see or hear it for some distance around here. Hinata and Sasuke nodded in response, and then they waited, reassuming their relaxed manner. Team 10 is directly above us, just over the rim, Hinata said 2 minutes later. I think they're just watching for now. The other two teams will arrive in less than 30 seconds, and they don't look like they're going to stop to study us. They're coming from opposite sides, already down here. Naruto nodded and stood up. There was no point in waiting around for the others to arrive if his opponents were there already. I'm going to engage up there, less shadows to deal with. I don't want to give Shikamaru too much time to plan, either. Try not to hurt them too badly, Sasuke said with a smirk. Be careful, Naruto. Hinata stood and, despite the extra onlookers, didn't blush when she placed a good luck kiss on his cheek. I love you. I love you too, he replied, adding his own kiss to her forehead. Be safe. With that he turned and trotted towards the opposite side of the stream, channeling chakra into his feet before starting up the side. He didn't think that any of them would be in real danger of losing their lives, but it was a ritual for him and Hinata now. Ever since he had died, they wouldn't go into anything remotely dangerous without those three simple yet powerful words. They didn't need to be spoken, of course, each knew how the other felt, but it was a comfort to go into battle after hearing it spoken aloud. I'll be careful, he confirmed to himself, though in truth he was more afraid of hurting one of his friends than losing. Did that make him prideful? He would need to ask Hinata later, he decided. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Kumo is northeast, right? Sasuke asked Hinata as he stood, taking his eyes from where Naruto was rapidly ascending the veritable cliff face. He focused instead on the gradually curving gorge that hosted their water source, angling out of sight to the northeast. He saw Hinata's nod out of the corner of his eye, but she said nothing. For an instant he was tempted to roll his eyes, but just for that instant. The bond between her and Naruto was strong, and he understood why they treated every parting like this as if it could be their last. He'll be fine, he said instead. I've heard that the other teams have been training harder since the last exam, especially those three, but they can't catch up on Naruto's 5 years of a head start. Plus they all know about Kurama now, so he doesn't have to keep that as a trump card this time. I know, Hinata sighed, finally taking her eyes away from her boyfriend's retreating form. I'm more worried about what he's thinking about than his physical well-being. Did you see him frown earlier, like he was thinking about something unpleasant? Sasuke shook his head. No, but I felt his tension for a moment. I think he believes we didn't notice. Do you think it has something to do with Kurama? Hinata chewed at her lower lip before nodding. Sasuke shrugged. There wasn't anything to be done about it right then. They would have to ask him later. Let's just focus on beating these guys. We can talk to him after. Girls, in your case, Hinata said in a teasing voice. It looks like you can't avoid them today. Whatever, Sasuke muttered. I'm going to engage them around the bend so you have more room to work with here. Good luck, and try not to take too much damage. I don't want to have to listen to Naruto fretting over you for the next few days. He didn't wait for a response, but he did hear her giggling as he sprinted away. Those two could be overly affectionate, but he had to admit that they were pretty cute sometimes. As Hinata had foretold, Sasuke saw the three kunoichi coming around the bend 10 seconds later. If they were surprised to see him coming alone, they gave no sign of it, and neither did they want to stop and chat like so many obnoxious opponents in the past. Good, he thought. I hate it when they talk. He locked eyes with the frontrunner, a girl with short blonde hair held in a sparse tail at the nape of her neck, and activated his Sharingan's innate genjutsu. He felt the connection immediately as the intense illusion took hold of the girl, causing her to jerk to a halt with eyes wide in that expressionless face. It would only take a second for her to go unconscious once his illusory phantasm broke her will. Kai, one of her teammates barked, clasping the captured girl's shoulder at the same time. She was taller than the other two, with long brown hair and dark, hawk-like eyes. So, she's the brains. Best to take her out first. The one I struck first looks like a fighter, judging by those muscles. The blonde was short and stocky, and her muscles looked like they could have matched any man's. Not much in the way of mental prowess, though, he noted, thinking of how easily she had succumbed to his initial technique. He's an Uchiha, the third said peevishly, standing on her guard by the other two. She was the prettiest of the three, though she seemed like a brat. They were only a dozen paces away, and so he could hear their conversation easily. Don't look directly into his eyes. Sasuke groaned. They were going to talk after all. He caught me off guard, the blonde said in a flat voice that matched her unremarkable features. It won't happen again. True enough, none of them were looking at his eyes now, instead focusing on a spot near his nose, mouth, or ear. Well, that took away one of his weapons, but he hadn't expected to be able to overcome them so easily. Where is your team? The tall brunette asked, glancing around warily. I don't feel them close by. Sensory type, he thought idly, wondering why she would give away such useful information so freely. We had 3 teams approaching at once, so we each took one. You 3 were unlucky enough to encounter me. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to stop letting you talk and get on to the part where you lose consciousness, or your lives. All 3 of them opened their mouths to respond, but he was as good as his word. Kaden. Flame contagion. A streak of fire shot from his lips, the tiny flame striking the taller one on the shoulder and quickly multiplying, leaping towards her allies. She cursed and leapt away, her teammates doing the same. The pretty one had been caught by the technique as well, but the fire was already being extinguished by a stream of water from her mouth. Ninjutsu. The sensory one probably uses projectiles and support jutsu, the bratty one uses ninjutsu to attack, and the short one is their taijutsu specialist. Now that he had them pinned, it was time to test the theories and use the knowledge gained to his advantage. The first kunoichi charged him immediately, and he had to admit that she was good. She wasn't as fast as he or Hinata was, but she could have kept pace with Naruto while matching his uncloaked strength. She lacked all of their precision and skill with forms, however. Sasuke was able to fend her off and even land a few hits while simultaneously fitting in hand seals to launch various ninjutsu at his other attackers, keeping all 3 occupied at once. They weren't bad, by any means, but they were all rightfully at genin level. A great fireball followed hot on the heels of a fist of lightning shuriken, both aimed at different targets. He twisted to avoid an open palm strike in the same breath, his Sharingan making the girl's movements appear sluggish. Maybe this is what Kakashi felt like sparring as, he thought idly, pivoting into a round kick that took his attacker in the stomach. His blow sent the blonde careening back into the brunette, just as planned, allowing Sasuke to focus on the last one for a few seconds. Doden. Earth rupture. The ground beneath the ninjutsu girl crumpled, toppling and trapping her momentarily. Megan. Shackling stakes, he said aloud. She was only just recovering from being knocked off balance, and thus was ill-prepared to counter his genjutsu. With her teammates too far away to assist, her mouth fell open in a silent scream as she was dragged into a faux world of Sasuke's creation, where she would be pinned in place by giant spikes that he suspected did not feel very pleasant. Raiden. Arc lighting. Sasuke barely had time to dive forward before a swath of rock was cut from where he had just been standing, the flash of electricity still writhing towards him by the time he came out of his roll. Chidori. Transfer. Rather than try to avoid the lightning arcing from the sensory girl's hands, it seemed he had been wrong about her. He instead extended his own lightning-infused right hand and caught the wild bolt. It continued to pitch and contort in every direction along its length, but the end stayed firmly attached as he matched its power output. Too bad for you that I only need to see a technique once. Raiden. Arc lightning. He flung out his other hand, allowing a new stream of chakra to flow into the same seeking strike that she had cast. Rather than utilize only his own chakra, however, he gave way to the flow with right hand and molded the chakra into his own, transferring it all out to amplify the bolt of lightning from his left palm. It had taken only a split second, and the shock on the girl's face made it plain that she had not expected him to stop running, let alone retaliate using her own ability. Never underestimate an Uchiha. A knee smashed into the side of his head at the same time as his supercharged lightning attack struck the other kunoichi. In the time between dodging the attack and redirecting it, he had lost track of the taijutsu specialist, and it seemed she had planned to take advantage of the distraction that her teammate had provided. The arc lightning flickered out immediately, and Sasuke tumbled away before striking the chasm wall with enough force to spiderweb a few small cracks up the side. Fuck, that hurt, he growled, angrier that he had let one of them land a hit than anything else. He let gravity pull him down as he righted himself, one hand on his head when he landed with a slight wince. He took everything in quickly. That instant of contact with her own technique had apparently incapacitated the sensory girl, who now lay on her back with her hair standing on end, her fingertips blackened. The last one standing was rushing him now, that plain face contorted with fury, her breath coming hard. She was likely still gasping for air from his kick. Well, I almost finished it without incident, he thought with a sigh. He stepped forward, allowing his hand to fall from his throbbing head to deflect a wide haymaker that had no place in a fight. His other hand came up to slam into her throat, though not hard enough to crush her trachea. Her eyes still bulged as his fingers latched on, and in that moment she forgot to avoid his gaze. He smiled. Got you. Sasuke allowed her body to fall limply to the ground, already forgetting her as he surveyed the other two. You three might have done pretty well, but it was a mistake to come after us first. It struck him for the first time just how far they had come since the last exam. True, he could have taken these three by himself months ago, but not nearly with the ease he had just now. He would take one blow to the head for an entire team defeated any day. He retrieved the backpacks of the two downed kunoichi first, slinging them over one shoulder before approaching the last. She was still staring wide-eyed at nothing, her mouth now closed but with her lips trembling in fear. She wouldn't have been able to see what had just occurred, and Sasuke considered for a moment breaking the genjutsu just so that she could see the result before going unconscious. No, he thought, almost embarrassed at having the thought. Naruto wouldn't approve of that, and Hinata would give me hell if she found out. With another sigh he swept a clean chop at the back of her head, allowing her to join her teammates on the ground rather than allow her more mental anguish. With 3 additional satchels in tow, he retrieved one of their flares and lit it with a trickle of chakra, kicking it into the air before turning to walk back to where he had left Hinata. Chances are she would be finished with her bout soon, if she wasn't already. He wouldn't want to give her a greater advantage than she already had. He allowed the corner of his lips to twitch up into a small smile. He was stronger, and becoming more so by the day. It won't be long now, Itachi. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. We're Team Blood, from a Megakure. Hinata raised an inquisitive eyebrow at the girl who had just introduced her team, though she didn't intend any mockery with the gesture. It was just odd to her that the other team had simply approached her so casually and offered their names. She had been waiting patiently for them, true, but her unconcerned nature should have tipped them off to be cautious. Instead they had brazenly landed, stepped forward, and given their names, Takara, and her 2 teammates Masaru and Goro. She would have been beautiful, in Hinata's opinion, if not for the perpetual sneer she seemed to favor. The 2 boys were both taller than her, and had to be several years older as well. They had both gained the definition and musculature that came with physical maturity, although neither seemed to be as malicious as the kunoichi. My name is Hyuga Hinata, from Team Sei, Hinata began, trying to at least return the courtesy. We know who you are, Hyuga, Takara interrupted with a dismissive wave of her hand. We did a little research before starting the exam, and we could tell that you 3 are the strongest that Konoha has to offer. That's why we came to defeat you first, she explained as if it were obvious. Hinata's eyebrow twitched, though not in annoyance. This girl had enough confidence to rival Naruto, and she wanted to laugh for some reason. It just seemed such an odd strategy, to try to find the hardest fight straight off, but there it was. Where are the other two? One of the young men asked, scanning around suspiciously. Scouting. I don't feel comfortable beating one little girl, but this is a competition, Guro said in a mockery of an apologetic tone. He reached behind his belt and tugged his nunchaku free, taking the weapon into one hand to begin spinning it. Wherever they are, we'll find them after we kill her. Kill. Hinata thought sadly, just stopping herself from shaking her head. Too many shinobi were eager to kill when it wasn't necessary to do so. Perhaps it was just their upbringing. In fact, it most certainly was. That was something that she and Naruto had talked at length about, often with Iruka. The world needed changing so that all of this senseless bloodshed could cease. They just hadn't come up with a solution yet. We had 3 teams approaching our location, she explained calmly, lowering deliberately into a modified Jukan stance. They've gone to engage them, and I volunteered to stop you. You. Takara scoffed, cracking her knuckle as she flexed her fingers. I've heard about your clan, girl, but there's no way you can beat us 3-on-1. She wasn't confident like Naruto was, Hinata decided. This girl was just filled with pride. We will see, Hinata said simply, focusing her chakra into her hands. Come. And I will show you which of us is stronger, she added to herself after a pause. Naruto and Sasuke had both been helping with her tenacity over the years, but she didn't think she would ever be as outwardly sure of herself as Sasuke always was, or as vocally courageous as Naruto. Still, she was sure of herself in her own way, and that was enough. Masaru, you know what to do, Takara growled, dismissiveness replaced by icy anger. Guro, follow my lead, and don't go easy on her. That was all the warning Hinata received before the 2 close-ranged fighters were on her, but it was all that she needed. Even after years of training with Sasuke and Naruto, and more recently their increasingly intense training with Kakashi, Hinata was surprised to find the 2 genin relatively easy to keep up with. It was a 2-on-1, of course, so she needed most of the speed she could muster, but even still she could deflect and counter every strike offered by her adversaries. If she pushed herself, she was sure that she would be able to land a few return blows as well, which would eventually wear them down by shutting off their tenketsu. She watched Masaru while skirmishing with the other 2, making sure to keep an eye on him using her Byakugan. As suspected, he was the ninjutsu user, and he circled the fight trying to find places to attack from. Luckily for her, he didn't have an affinity for earth, or else she would have had a difficult time in her melee. Instead, he sent various water techniques at her, all of which she avoided through careful timing. He had to be judicious with his jutsu in order to avoid hitting his teammates, so the attacks were fairly predictable, but still added an additional hindrance. Takara seemed astonished after the first 10 seconds, but gradually her expression hardened into bitterness and increasing fury. Hinata sympathized with her, in a way. It would be frustrating to throw her full strength against an opponent, the cumulative experience of 3 individual genin, and get shut down so handily by one apparently at your own rank. But this was real combat, and there wasn't any time for sympathy. Hokage. 64 palms, Hinata murmured in the middle of her backbend, allowing Guro's slicing nunchaku to pass harmlessly over her. Before beginning her technique, she was forced to flip backwards, kicking aside an axe kick from Takara mid-twirl before landing upright. She didn't even spare an instant in the transition, flowing forward seamlessly into her strikes. 2 strikes. 4 strikes. 8 strikes. 16 strikes. 32 strikes. 64 strikes. She went about it adroitly, spreading the blurred impacts between the 2 as opportunity presented itself. At one juncture, while Guro was trying and failing to fend off a blow to his side and Takara had just been struck in her arm, she cancelled the technique and leapt into the air, narrowly avoiding a broad torrent of water that would have crushed her against the ravine wall. Mid-flight she spun and landed hard kicks to both of her opponent's skulls, sending them tumbling several meters before she landed clear of the artificial wave. Hokage. Ethereal Senbon. Even as she landed, her hands were raised towards Masaru, who cursed and began sprinting diagonally towards his team. Futon. Gale Palm. The handful of chakra projectiles had been aimed with the next technique in mind, several finding their mark as the rain ninja's legs were torn out from under him in the violent wind. Who are you? Goro grunted, by now having struggled to his feet beside Takara. Her eyes were black pits of rage, and her voice dripped venom as she spat her own statement out before Hinata could respond. She's just one girl. One little girl. Hinata realized then that Takara was likely as old as her teammates were, even if she looked much younger. She understood a bit more then, at least about why the other girl was so spiteful. Some shinobi never made it past genin, that was just how it worked. They lacked one or more essential qualities to obtain higher rank, and subsequently either accepted their position or became an ordinary citizen. Takara, it seemed, had been unable to do either, and was still struggling to prove herself. It made Hinata sad to consider, but that was just another part of the world they lived in, to either be endured or changed. My name is Hyuga Hinata, a member of Team 7 and a shinobi of Konoha. Another time I might allow you to leave here, but due to the nature of this exam I must secure your provisions for my friends. I'm very sorry. She really did feel terribly about this whole ordeal, she realized, but there was nothing for it. This violent, glorified thievery just didn't sit well with her, even if it was for a greater purpose. Don't talk as if you've already won. Takara practically screeched. Goro. You. Her words cut off abruptly when Hinata simply appeared behind them. Hinata had moved as quickly as she had been able to, controlling her chakra so that it enhanced every muscle and tendon in her legs and torso to their limits. It was a subconscious act now, so much so that merely thinking of it was enough to put the flow in motion. No chakra was wasted in the process, exactly enough used to accomplish her purposes and no more. Her reserves were worlds less than Naruto, and even fell short of Sasuke's, so she had learned to compensate by being more efficient. That was the reason that Takara and Goro didn't have time to react before she delivered swift blows to the backs of their heads, allowing them to crumple forward silently. Please, she said, turning towards Masaru. He had struggled to his knees, blood dripping from several punctures in his arms and abdomen. Hinata had to suppress a wince. Using her ethereal senbon in situations with real enemies was all well and good, but the fact that no projectile was left over meant that bleeding out was a real risk. Agree to forfeit. I'll heal all of you and cause no more harm, I promise. You. Masaru gasped, twitching at every movement. How are you so strong? You're just a genin, like us. Hinata approached him cautiously, but it was clear that there was nothing to fear from the fallen boy. Do you agree? She asked. He flinched, then looked to his downed teammates and nodded numbly. Thank you, she said sincerely, kneeling beside him to begin healing. She was glad that she wouldn't have to take it any further than necessary. She would have, if necessary, but avoiding pointless bloodshed was important to her. I'm strong because of my friends, she replied simply. They believed in me, and we have all supported one another since we were young. We saw a purpose in our strength and continued growth, and sought after that purpose together. That's where our power comes from. Our convictions and dedication to one another, and our village. I think it's a little late for us to do that, Masaru sighed, flexing his mended muscles as Hinata stepped back. We've always been together, but I wouldn't say that we've ever been friends. It's never too late, Hinata smiled, offering him her hand. There's always a tomorrow. Today, in fact. They won't be out for more than an hour, after all. Masaru glanced at his team again, seemed to take hold of himself, then nodded before pulling a flare from his kunai holster. He shrugged out of his backpack and handed it over, grinning abashedly. Sorry for what we said earlier. I'll be cheering for you during the rest of the exams. It's all right, Hinata said with a light laugh. But I would consider changing your team name. Team Blood is a little too bold and negative, I think. His cheeks colored slightly at the remark, but he managed a laugh. Hinata made quick work of healing the others' minor injuries before retrieving their packs, waiting until Masaru lit and tossed his flare before turning to go. She kept her Byakugan active just in case, but she didn't really expect him to try a surprise assault after their exchange. He seemed to be a nice young man, just caught in some negative circumstances. She believed he could change that, and that he would certainly try to. Yo, Sasuke said, stepping out of the shadows nearby. Hinata jumped, turning the reaction into a ready stance in the blink of an eye. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, wearing an amused smirk. Sorry. I used the concealment barrier when I realized that you were still fighting. I didn't want to distract you. I still should have seen you, Hinata breathed, calming herself and straightening. They had invented the technique together for hiding in plain sight, but she had always been able to see through it with her Byakugan. I altered it a little and suppressed my chakra signature, Sasuke shrugged. I figured that keeping a small amount of chakra flowing into the barrier would make it difficult for you to see through unless you were concentrating on it. I guess it did, she said thoughtfully, eyes on the spot that he had emerged from. She shook her head as he fell in step beside her, scanning around worriedly. Naruto isn't back yet, and he's more than 2 kilometers away. I can't see him even when I push my vision to its limits. He'll probably be back soon, Sasuke said unconcernedly. I'd like to think that Team 10 is stronger than those two. He sat down after they had passed out of sight from Team Blood, reassuming his recline and closing his eyes. He probably won't take their supplies if he wins, will he? Probably not, Hinata admitted, though the thought gave her cause to smile. Naruto was always thoughtful, of his friends more than others. When he won, he probably wouldn't even make them surrender. That was her Naruto. She settled down to wait with Sasuke, trying not to feel more concerned than necessary. Come back soon. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Naruto should have guessed that Shikamaru would have a plan already, but he hadn't expected to have to chase Team 10 through a series of traps for several kilometers. They must be setting them up on the run, he thought, jumping a tripwire that had been drawn between 2 pitiful shrubs. He cursed just before touching back down, pouring chakra into his legs and rocketing sideways the instant that he hit the ground. Several explosions went off where he had landed, though he noted that none had been powerful enough to do him serious harm. I've had about enough of this. Don't lose your head, Kurama said, still sounding warier than usual. That Nara kid has a head on his shoulders, the likes of which you'll never achieve. If you abandon what wits you have, you might actually lose. I was just going to use some of your chakra to let me catch up real quick, Naruto grumbled, skidding to a halt and squinting around. But now I lost sight of them. Great. An odd sensation hit him then, causing him to go completely rigid for a few seconds, though he quickly realized that he had lost control of his own body. It was strange to be standing, or floating, rather, inside of his own mind, aware of the outside world but unable to act. For a split second he was formless, floating in infinite darkness with no bearings, unsure which way was up or down. Somehow he could still see out of his own eyes, but they looked like twin tunnels very far away that he couldn't get closer to. This is Ino's mind transfer jutsu, isn't it? He asked the darkness. He would have hit himself had he possessed a face to pummel. To fall for such a technique. Idiot, Kurama rumbled from somewhere, and suddenly he was of an all too familiar room with a massive cage at one end. You shouldn't have stopped moving. Yeah. Naruto took a moment to make sure that his body, at least, the one in his mind, was all there. It had been disconcerting to not be able to feel himself. From what I know of this jutsu, her consciousness should be inside my head somewhere right now, taking control of my body. The fox said nothing, just watched him from that murky darkness beyond the bars. A long time ago, he began again, thinking hard, you said that I'm unique because I have this space in my mind. Some kind of extra dimension or something, right? That was all the response he got. He was going to have to figure this one out on his own, although a possible solution was already forming in his mind. He had to get out of this quick, or he really could lose. There was no way he was going to let Sasuke and Hinata down. Alright. Then can you drag her in here? I think I have an idea. The Kyuubi's lips curled into a satisfied, if malevolent, smirk as Naruto explained what he wanted to do. It only took a few seconds to relay, but every moment counted. At last Kurama nodded, then shifted his gaze towards the center of the chamber, past Naruto's shoulder. Welcome to my lair, mortal, Kurama growled, adding in a sinister chuckle for effect. How brazen of you to intrude into my domain. Naruto turned to find Ino standing frozen behind him, her eyes almost comically wide as she gaped up at the hulking Biju. He hadn't requested much of Kurama, only that he appear as intimidating as possible and pretend to be dangerous. In reality, the QB didn't need to play at either of those, the beast simply was intimidating and dangerous by nature. As Naruto had requested, red-orange chakra began oozing between the bars, flowing towards the girl in a slow but steady advance. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to get out of my head, Naruto said roughly, doing his best to utilize his own appearance to what effect he could. Everybody knew his personality well enough, but he suspected that some might forget that his slit red eyes used to be bright blue, and that his elongated canines were recent additions. He raised a hand, all 5 fingers spread out to indicate her time limit. 5, he began, accepting Kurama's chakra as it reached him. The energy flowed around him like a living thing, the remaining wave continuing its pace onward. 4. He lowered one finger. The chakra covered him completely now, beginning to flare up higher in violent spikes of power. He took one step forward. 3. Wait. Ino half cried, taking a step back in response to his own. Why you're not supposed to be able to see me. You can't do anything to me here. Where is this? Her voice raised another octave in panic, and she looked desperately around for a way out. Naruto took another step forward. 2. The wave of reddish chakra picked up speed, rising and lashing forward at different points as if anticipating devouring its prey. Naruto had continued moving as well, now running forward to keep pace with Kurama's display. Ino yelled something incoherent and stumbled backwards, hitting the large metal door to the room. She spun and began pulling desperately at the handle, but it might as well have been attached to a wall for all the door moved. In his mind's eye he watched as Shikamaru came into view and knelt to begin his technique, though it seemed to be happening in slow motion. Time was running out. 1. Naruto snarled, now sprinting at full speed with the massive wall of chakra closing in from all sides. He put on his best crazed smile, trying to mimic Kurama's smirk. Ino screamed and banged on the door before whirling, eyes rolling in every direction, seeking an escape. She vanished in the instant before Naruto would have collided with her, and as she did the room seemed to fall apart around Naruto. The last thing he heard was the rumbling of the QB's laugh before he was plummeting into that infinite blackness again. Straight back into his own body, where he was again completely stiff and unable to move on his own, although at least he could feel again. An icy breeze tugged at his cloak, and he could feel the cold seeping through his jikatabi from the rock underfoot. Shikamaru was kneeling several meters away, his hands clasped together in a rat seal and wearing a decidedly tight expression. Choji was next to him, looking solemn and supporting Ino with one arm, who looked like she had just finished vomiting and was still trembling. Shadow imitation successful, Shikamaru muttered, sparing a glance for his pallid teammate. What happened? Her lips opened and shut several times before she just closed her eyes and shuddered. Sorry about that, Naruto started, glad that his face at least relaxed into an apologetic expression. Met Kurama. Shikamaru blinked and returned his gaze to Naruto, though that was the limit to his reaction. Choji swallowed and shifted his feet uneasily. What? You guys know that he's in there. I thought that it could cause some issue, Shikamaru responded, but I didn't think it would be so violent. We may have gone overboard in trying to get her out, Naruto admitted, but I knew you'd be trying to get in position for this, so I wanted to make it quick. Sorry, Ino. The girl really did look like a mess, but he had to admit that she had accomplished her task. He was stuck, but it felt like there was a small amount of give in his invisible bonds. Why did you guys come after us, anyway? He wanted to add, we're from the same village, or, you guys know how much we train, but felt that either might be considered provocation. Ino wanted to. Choji replied with a shrug. She said there were other teams heading for you, and that we could probably take advantage. Well, it worked out as I expected it to, Shikamaru sighed, standing and scratching his head. Naruto grunted as his own hand mirrored his friend's. This technique was annoying. They got split up, and now it's 3-on-1. Despite Ino's condition, we still completed the formation. No offense, Naruto, he continued, suddenly looking uncomfortable. I wanted to see if our extra training would make us a match for you three, but I'll take this matchup over the alternatives. None taken. Naruto said lightly. But I have to tell you, we didn't get split up. He flexed his muscles, testing the invisible bonds. They were strong, but it felt like they would give way with enough force. Shikamaru's eyes narrowed, and Choji looked worried. We decided to take on 3 teams at the same time. Hinata and Sasuke decided that I was the best choice for you 3. He managed another apologetic smile. Looks like they were right so far. Choji, Shikamaru said urgently, prompting his ally to practically drop Ino. Naruto began to rapidly amass chakra in his arms and legs, now actively trying to force the paralysis away. Shikamaru grunted and went back to one knee, forcing Naruto down as well. Several more shadows separated from the other boys, snaking across the ground until they attached to his. The tightness seemed to thicken, like an invisible pressure pushing on him from all sides. Baika no Jutsu. Choji's midsection ballooned, and Naruto knew what was coming even before his head and limbs disappeared. Nikuden Sensha. In a blur of speed he began a rapid rotation forward, becoming a human boulder on a collision course with Naruto. You might want to use my chakra to break that, Kurama suggested. You have less than 2 seconds before he hits you. I've got it, Naruto assured him. Can't rely on you every time I'm in a bind, get it? He envisioned the Kyuubi's eyes rolling more than he felt the exasperation, but he didn't have time to focus on it. As Choji tore towards him he released a concentrated blast of chakra, letting it go wild inside of him. The bluish energy erupted around him with an audible roar, climbing high like a feeding flame. For an instant Naruto thought that it might not be enough, but he heard Shikamaru curse just before the rotund boy hit him, and he was free. Naruto flung out his hands to halt the oncoming genin, expecting to be pushed back a good many paces in the process. However, Choji's course altered at the last second, and suddenly he was back to normal size and flying past Naruto. Partial expansion. A fist the size of Naruto's entire body slammed into his side, sending him spinning off towards a crater that he had passed earlier. Ow. Naruto twisted as soon as he decelerated enough to do so, feet hitting the ground and allowing him to continue sliding for another 10 meters. I didn't think he could do that. Choji's never been fast. They've been training harder ever since you spoke to Shikamaru almost 4 months ago. He paused, then continued with a more annoyed tone. Closer to 5 months for us. You and your damned Hiraishin. Well, they've come a long way. That was all the conversation Naruto had time for. Choji was charging towards him once again, and if he saw correctly Shikamaru's shadowy tendrils had actually lifted from the ground and were now streaking towards him. Kurama's cloak sprung up around him when he called it, a single tail twitching behind as he rolled to one side to avoid Choji. He came up running, his long coat and cloak streaming from side to side as he dodged the shadow spikes. A glance showed him that Ino was recovering, if slowly, but soon she'd be back in the fight and double intent on seeing him defeated. Time to show off a little. Between darting to the left and sidestepping another of the Akamichi's attacks, Naruto drew one of his special kunai and threw it towards Shikamaru. He aimed it so that the other boy wouldn't be inclined to dodge, and hopefully think it just a wild throw. His gamble proved profitable when neither Ino nor her teammate moved to deflect the weapon off course, and it landed harmlessly between and behind them. Perfect. He drew out a smoke bomb and an explosive tag, wrapping the latter around the former before concentrating. It was difficult to focus on while sprinting and flitting between jabs of shadows and diving to avoid a giant rolling person, but he managed to get the mental lock on his seal. He lit the tag and executed the jutsu, transporting both objects behind his adversaries. The explosion had the desired effect. It wasn't close enough to seriously injure them, but the shockwave was enough to throw them off balance and distract for just long enough. The smoke spread at the same time, covering the 2 genin in a shroud that blocked their views and, more importantly for Naruto, got rid of those pesky shadows for the time being. He had only 10 seconds to act now before they recovered, but it was enough. He turned while massing chakra in his right hand, taking great care not to make the technique too powerful. Kurama's chakra amplified its power already, so he hardly used any of his own as the orb of concentrated energy spiraled into existence. Choji was already coming at him, and was far too close to move too far off track now. Rasengan. Again, the other boy had tried to cancel his jutsu and dodge to the side, and he would have succeeded if not for Naruto's control of the Kyuubi's cloak. A red claw leapt from his shoulder and grabbed Choji's ankle as he was flying by, drawing a yelp from the boy even before the Rasengan hit. Naruto aimed it at his side and didn't make a full impact, but it was more than enough to send his opponent spinning uncontrollably at a frightening speed. He watched only long enough to see the impact when Choji struck the ground and skid several dozen meters to a halt. There would be no recovering from that for a while. What? Ino coughed, staggering out of the smoke screen and looking very green. She must have inhaled some of the fumes, and that on top of her earlier incapacitation must not have been good for her. What was that? I'd like to know that as well, Shikamaru muttered, clearing the haze at the same time. I put the kunai and your makeshift bomb together too late, even if it didn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense, he said, clearly annoyed that he couldn't understand what had happened. But you somehow got the tag to your kunai. That's not even possible. Ino scowled, doing her best to straighten and already looking less queasy. It seemed that the exploding tag had done less than Naruto had hoped. Space-time ninjutsu? Shikamaru asked, clearly vexed. Naruto grinned, dropping into his standard Goken stance. He wasn't about to give away his father's legacy. The other boy shook his head, looking off towards where Choji lay. Normally I would say that this is too troublesome to continue, he continued, eyes going back to Naruto. But we haven't finished proving ourselves yet. The Ino Shika Cho formation isn't the only thing we've gotten better at. Ino. Right. What happened next surprised Naruto more than anything else had that day. Ino snatched a scroll from her belt pouch and broke its seal, unraveling it partway and letting it fall to the ground. Halfway there the parchment issued forth a plume of smoke, and by the time it touched down she was drawing a sword. A sword. The haughty, girly, never serious about training kunoichi drew a full-length katana and rushed forward, her footsteps looking smooth and practiced. She lifted one of her hands, popping a soldier pill into her mouth. Bright sea green chakra sprang up the length of the blade, narrowing until it became like a vibrating extension of the weapon. That was when he knew that the fight was only just beginning. Naruto was faster than Ino. There was no question about it, and had he been able to land a blow it could easily have decided the fight. But it appeared that she had spent the bulk of her training these last months honing her offensive skills, namely those involving kenjutsu, and it showed. Her footwork was flawless, and she wasted no movement in transition from one form to another, keeping Naruto on his toes trying to avoid the precise strikes that oftentimes changed mid-course. On top of his difficulty with Ino, he still had to pay attention to Shikamaru. She was deliberately trying to force him towards her ally, he knew, but in turn he made sure to keep her back to the other boy so that he could watch them both. Quit being soft, Kurama said irritably. This is getting tiresome. I don't want to hurt her too badly, Naruto protested, although he knew that the fox had a point. He could outlast Ino's chakra easily, and Shikamaru's as well, but it might take too long. He didn't know how Sasuke and Hinata were doing, and it was possible they needed his help. But I guess you're right. He twisted when Ino went in for her next vertical strike, using his chakra-laced hand to deflect and grab the blade and force it to one side. To his surprise the weapon cut through the Kyuubi's cloak, if barely, and he felt the bite of metal on his hand. He continued through with the movement regardless, rushing past her guard in a burst of speed and landing a hard elbow in her stomach. The blow doubled her over and the weapon dropped the ground, its clatter drowning out her gasps for air as she too hit the cold earth. Before he could knock her unconscious with a quick jab, Shikamaru was on him. It had been a long time since Naruto had sparred with the other boy, and like with Ino he knew that he was faster and stronger, but Shikamaru had not been lying when he had claimed to have improved. He now wore his own shadow as a kind of second skin. He had somehow managed to form it to his own body, and it was disconcerting looking down to see that the muted sunlight seemed to give him no shadow to speak of. His fighting style was completely foreign, apparently developed around this unique ability he had invented. With every jab shadows leapt from his arm, creating more pinpoint strikes aimed at different parts of Naruto's body. Every kick brought with it 3 or 4 more lashes of darkness, each carrying as much force, if not more, than the real attacks. Naruto was completely taken aback by the ferocity of the assault at first, put on the defensive immediately. This was not the Shikamaru he knew. Shikamaru had always thought of combat as troublesome, and preferred to plot from the proverbial shadows than to engage in direct skirmishes. He was a planner by nature, and would always try to find the simplest and most effective means of defeating his opponents. This was not that Shikamaru. This was a boy that had decided to take his training seriously, and had worked to expand his skill set to become a truly formidable adversary. The same could be said of Ino, who had before focused entirely on her family's jutsu and sensory abilities. Now she had learned to infuse her chakra into her weapon, and use that weapon to great effect. Even Choji had added variety to his repertoire, able to change individual parts of his body on top of improving his speed and reflexes. This was indeed a different Team 10 than the one that had fought in the last set of exams. Naruto would have laughed if he had been allowed a moment to do so. This is awesome, he thought joyously, countering a chop with his forearm and using Kurama's chakra to intercept the shadow strikes. He might not be as fast as Hinata and Sasuke, but his taijutsu is great, and those shadows make it almost impossible to counterattack. I need to spar with him more often. He is good, Kurama mused. He probably got the idea from watching you manipulate my chakra at some point, though I don't know when he would have seen it done. He might even be genius enough to have done that on the fly from watching you during this fight. That's Shikamaru for you. I wish I could fight longer, but I need to get back soon. The thought came easily enough, but it surprised him how difficult it was to find an opening to end the fight. Shikamaru was a black blur, every part of him save for his eyes shrouded in shadow. The strain was evident in those eyes, however, and Naruto could imagine why. Constantly manipulating that much chakra with such precision would take a serious mental toll on anybody, and even with his own control of Kurama's chakra he had trouble blocking all of those hits. Red flashes of chakra met black tendrils again and again as fists and feet flew in a frenzy. It would have been a spectacle to watch, Naruto thought. To Naruto's horror, his whole body froze in the middle of a punch aimed at Shikamaru's chin. He felt the world dropping away again, but only for an instant before the technique was released. That momentary halt was all that Shikamaru had needed, however. He pivoted, putting all of his strength into twin open palm strikes right into Naruto's ribs. Shadows lashed out all down his arms, making contact simultaneously and adding their combined force with the physical hits. The air left Naruto's lungs in a rush, and he could hear his ribs creak under the pressure as he was lifted off of his feet and blown backwards. Only the added protection of the Kyuubi's chakra kept any bones from breaking, but it was a close call. He hit the ground hard a ways off, tumbling and coughing and struggling to get upright. Nice job, Ino, Shikamaru panted, his shadow seeming to slide off of him all at once. He fell to one knee, sweat pouring down his face that held a fierce grin in place. He felt that hit. Damn right I did, Naruto groaned, finally getting one leg under him and shakily getting to his feet. That had hurt. A lot. He had felt every one of those strikes through the covering of chakra and through his body armor, and the points of impact still throbbed angrily. Bruises would be in his near future. That was incredible, you guys. I have to admit, it was interesting. Those three have grown. Funny what a few words can do when offered at the right time. What's incredible? Ino coughed, still holding her torso and looking pained. Is that you're still standing? What the hell are you made of? She sounded indignant, but begrudgingly impressed. I don't know what it is, but I think we need some of it. Shikamaru laughed, the sound coming out a bit weak. He shook his head, looking exhausted. I don't have any more in me. You win, Naruto. It was a relief to be able to release the massive amount of chakra that he had been holding on to, and with it went a good bit of his own strength. He took a few unsteady steps before he regained control, moving to retrieve his kunai and shaking his head all the while. Kurama was right. Team 10 was a force to be reckoned with. If he wasn't a Jinchuriki, it was very likely that he would have been on the ground minutes ago. But one worked with the tools that he had, and he was definitely glad to have what he did right then. Well, you're damn impressive as always, Naruto, Shikamaru said with a wince, rising slowly with Ino's help. I thought we could beat you together, but the trick with the kunai sealed your victory, I think. Are you going to tell me what that was? Sorry, Shikamaru, Naruto said with a grin. That's a Team 7 secret for now. Maybe after the exam is over. The other boy nodded, then deliberately removed his backpack and held it out. You could have continued if you wanted to, Shikamaru shrugged. We were beaten, so the supplies are yours. We'll get them from another team tomorrow. You really think I would take your stuff? Naruto laughed, pushing the satchel away and shaking his head. I don't care what you say. I'm not taking it. I know you'd do the same for me if our situations were reversed. Shikamaru considered that for a moment, nodded, and just as casually slipped the bag back over his shoulder. We need to see to Choji, and I expect you want to get back to your team. Thanks for not hitting him full force, he put in before turning. We'll see you in 6 days. Surprisingly, Ino beamed at him before she began trotting towards her fallen comrade. Naruto couldn't get the smile off of his face as he left, jogging back to where he had left Sasuke and Hinata. He was proud of his former classmates for what they had accomplished, and glad that he had been able to fight them. Ready for another 6 days of that? Kurama asked mildly, likely intending it to be a jeer. You bet I am. And he was. So far this was turning out far better than the last exam, both in experience and the notable lack of true danger. He sobered a bit at that thought, although a little voice in the back of his head told him that, if Orochimaru decided to make another appearance, he would find a much different group of genin than he had first encountered. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Man, I'm tired, Naruto sighed, leaning back against the curved stone wall of their camp. Sasuke had raised a stone prison to serve as protection as night fell, leaving a small hole for them to crawl through at one side and another at the top for the smoke from their fire to escape. The little blaze had warmed the interior of their hideout well, creating a safe and cozy environment to spend the night in. I don't even know how you're still awake after what you did, Sasuke snorted, taking his own leisure on the opposite side of the space. Our fights were boring by comparison. Naruto opened his eyes long enough to wink at his friend and witness the subsequent eye roll, then closed them again and snuggled a little closer to Hinata. She was already fast asleep at his side, using his shoulder as a pillow. She had spent a considerable amount of chakra that day as well, keeping her Byakugan active and searching a broad area while also healing Naruto after his fight. They hadn't encountered any other teams since that morning, but he suspected that more than a few had been eliminated, even outside of the ones they had taken care of. You should have seen Shikamaru's technique, Naruto said for what felt like the 10th time already. He couldn't help it. It had really been impressive. I'm more surprised that Ino put up what fight she did. She was never any good at taijutsu, or any combat, really. Sasuke shook his head. Maybe we should have taken some time spying on the other teams beforehand. Still, you did take them out by yourself. I doubt it would have been much a contest if all three of us had engaged them. Maybe, Naruto admitted. They're still a lot stronger than before. It makes me happy. Happy. They're our enemies in this exam. Yeah, but it means that Konoha is stronger as a whole. It means that the next generation of shinobi is going to be strong, and that's good. His eyes fluttered closed again, feeling heavier than ever. We'll do the title of the Konoha 12 proud, Sasuke. We'll win this time, too. Yeah, we will. No matter what, he heard Sasuke say before a quiet hiss announced the dousing of the fire. Naruto heard the tarp settling over the hole above and the grating of stone closing their door, but he was too tired to get his eyes open again to look. Instead he just pulled Hinata a little closer, letting her soft, sleepy murmurs lull him into a deep, welcome slumber. Chapter 30. Power to be feared. Less than a day left, Naruto hummed, lying back against the curved stone with a sigh. It had been a remarkably dull 4 days following that first, and he had truly been looking forward to fighting strong genin from other villages. They had only encountered 3 additional teams since then, and out of fairness, and Sasuke's suggestion, they had each faced one of them alone. Each experience had been as disappointing as Hinata and Sasuke's first 2 fights had sounded, finished in a few minutes with hardly any effort to speak of. It made a certain amount of sense, though. Kakashi had told them repeatedly that they were Chunin level at least, and more than once had insinuated that they might not be far off from Jonin. Naruto supposed that the point of these exams would be realized soon enough once they were all promoted. After seeing the competition, there wasn't a doubt in his mind that they would all be chunin before long. As per their plan, well, Hinata's plan, they had focused their efforts during the second day on locating one of the oases. It had taken much longer than expected given that they had a Byakugan to search with, but by mid-afternoon Hinata had led them into a deep, narrow fissure barely wide enough for them to walk single file. After wriggling through a bare crack in the wall and crawling a short distance through complete darkness, they had found themselves in a hidden cave outfitted with everything they would need to coast through the remainder of the exam. There were 3 bedrolls stacked neatly to one side, a small crate filled with canteens of clean water, another packed with enough field rations to last 5 days, and a tall stack of treated firewood and kindling. The narrowest of clefts in the low ceiling provided a vent for any smoke to escape through, although the supply of fuel was so dry that hardly a wisp left the flames. All in all, it was a cozy place to set up camp and do as they had planned, relax as much as possible, and begin to work on thinning the ranks. Despite having come up with the proposal in the first place, Hinata had showed some distaste for actively seeking out other teams to knock out of the exam. It hadn't taken much convincing for her to see that it was only in their benefit to do so, both to ensure that there wouldn't be preliminaries to grind through and because they were being judged every step of the way. Taking a purely passive route or an overly aggressive path might tilt the proctor's favor away from them, seeing as these exams were meant to select genin with leadership capabilities to match their ninja skills. This way showed that they understood pacing and priorities. However, it had all come down to fun when Sasuke had insisted they continue engaging teams with only one of their own number. Naruto knew what his friend was about, of course, but surprisingly Hinata had gone right along with them. For more practical reasons, of course. It made more sense to leave 2 of them well rested in case of an ambush, and they were there to show off their talents, in a manner of speaking. I figured at least some of these teams would have been more trying, Sasuke muttered from across the cave, bringing Naruto's attention back to his surroundings. The other boy was lounging on his bedroll, one knee up and with one arm placed languidly over his eyes to block out the firelight. Naruto smirked. He had been saying the same thing since the beginning. It's almost embarrassing that these genin are representing their villages. Sasuke, Hinata began in a chiding tone, her voice drawing Naruto's eyes across the crackling fire. She sat cross-legged, Byakugan active but otherwise appearing relaxed and slightly amused. Not every team will be like the ones we've fought. Discounting those we've beaten, there are at least 11 others, including Gaara's and the others from Konoha. Just leaves 7 other weakling triads running around waiting to be stomped, he shrugged. If the others are any indicator, anyway. Were they all like this last time around? Remember that first team we took out in the Forest of Death? The one from Konoha. Hinata and Sasuke both nodded. Pretty sure we said the same thing about them, too, and these teams have definitely been stronger than the ones from before. That Suna team I fought a few days ago was pretty fun, remember? I just think we're outpacing most other genin, kind of like how Kakashi-sensei got to Jonin really fast. I wouldn't quite compare us to Kakashi-sensei, Hinata said. But I do think that the teams we've been up against are the ones who belong at these exams. We're, perhaps a bit beyond where we ought to be. Sasuke snorted as if to say, that's putting it lightly, but offered no actual comment in rebuttal. They all knew it was true, to one degree or another. Being confident in their own strength went hand in hand with remembering to be humble. That last bit was something Naruto sometimes struggled with. Sasuke didn't even bother with humility most times, but Hinata had enough to cover his share too. Anyway, Naruto went on, leaning forward to add another log to the fire. We can probably stay here until tomorrow morning, then move out when it's getting close to midday. Anko-sensei didn't say we had to meet anywhere, so the proctors will most likely stop the exam at noon and come get us. It'd be best if we were topside for that, yeah. They know where we are if they're actually watching, Sasuke offered. I'd rather just stay here and sleep more. Even if this exam has been boring, we haven't had a chance to rest this much in a long time. I wouldn't want to make them come get us in here, Hinata put in. Why don't we leave late morning when? She trailed off, concentrating on an innocuous point on the cave wall before going on. Team Guy is heading this way, and Neji Nissan has his Byakugan active. They'll see us once they come closer. No reason for us to go anywhere, Naruto said, settling back against the curved wall. They'll either change directions like that grass team did yesterday, or they'll come say hi. You want to invite them in for a cup of tea, too? Sasuke asked Riley. I know we don't want to fight any strong teams, but this is the Chunin exam. Right now they're our opponents and obstacles to getting through to the next portion of the test. Aw, come on, Sasuke. Maybe they just want to come hang out for a while. You said yourself that it's been getting boring these last few days, right? The other boy raised an eyebrow. Okay. Well, he hadn't said that exactly, but it was close enough. I say we let them in if they come this way. Remember, more Chunin for Konoha is a benefit for all of us, so there's no reason to run them off. I think so too, Hinata agreed, smiling at him in that special way that always made him feel warm inside. All of her smiles did that, but this one was a particular kind of warmth. We can find out more about the other participants from them as well, she added to Sasuke, dangling the tidbit of potential gain in front of him like a carrot. That would benefit us, wouldn't it? Fine, fine, Sasuke relented in a muted grumble. We have more food and water than we know what to do with anyway. Naruto grinned, sharing the expression with Hinata. They knew that their friend wasn't really as surly as he seemed. Probably. A few minutes passed before Team Guy arrived at the entrance to the cave, most likely taking it slow as a precaution. When Hinata announced that they had stopped outside, though, they simply waited without coming in for a time. Naruto was about to ask what was going on when Tenten's voice drifted into the oasis, sounding a mix between cautious and her usual playful self. So we figured you didn't want to fight from your reaction, she said, tone coming through clearly via the wind whisper technique. Can we come in, or am I gonna have to toss in one of my 10 bombs? Hinata giggled and formed the appropriate signs to reply without having to shout. Of course you can. Even Sasuke agreed not to attack you. Tenten's laugh faded away quickly enough that Naruto could hear his friend's snort. Team Guy ducked into their little den a few moments later, looking a bit more worse for wear than expected. Tenten's lower lip was a bit puffy, and more than a few spots of exposed skin looked burned. Lee's usual wide smile was somewhat diminished due to a swollen eye and a multitude of scrapes. Neji appeared the least physically harmed, but he was obviously tired and further drained of chakra than his comrades. All of their clothes were dirty and torn, causing them to appear even more ragged. Rough week so far? Naruto asked, shifting away from the wall to take a seat beside Hinata. Concern was written all over her, and even Sasuke had opened one eye to catch a glimpse of the newcomers, though it was most likely just due to the comment. Didn't start that way, Neji replied, sinking down in the spot that Naruto had vacated. Cleaned up a few weaker teams pretty fast in the first couple of days. We ran into an obstacle yesterday. It was a genin from the stone, Lee said excitedly, pumping his fist along with the words. You should have seen him, Naruto-kun. His allies were strong as well, but he could have outmatched the three of us alone. His youth was fiery and impressive or something, Tenten interrupted with a sigh. Neji and I think he was a Chunin, or maybe even a Jonin. He outpaced Lee with 3 gates open. 3. Sasuke whistled, finally sitting up now that something had caught his interest. But you're here, which means you beat him, right? Not quite. Tenten made a face, then glanced at one of the crates. You wouldn't happen to have some extra food or water lying around, would you? We had our packs taken while retreating, as embarrassing as that is. Tenten, Neji began, looking like an instructor about to chastise a student. Before he could continue, though, Hinata was offering a ration pack and canteen across the fire to him. He blinked, made a face, and then straightened his expression before making a seated bow. Thank you, Hinata-sama. He took the proffered meal graciously, as did Tenten and Lee when Hinata handed them theirs. We're all Konoha shinobi, she smiled, settling back down. With such limited attendance in these exams, there's almost no chance of preliminaries this time around either, so there's no harm in helping one another. Yosh. That was Lee's only response before he tore open his own rations, grabbing the smaller packs inside and emptying them into his mouth without discrimination. Naruto was pretty sure that one of them had been labeled coffee, but he couldn't be certain. At least say, "Thank you, Lee," Tenten groaned, putting her hands together and bowing towards Team 7 as a whole. "Really? Thank you. Getting through the night and tomorrow morning would have been rough if we hadn't run into you three." "You'd do the same for us," Naruto assured, though the other team's generosity wasn't foremost in his mind at the moment. "But you said you had to run away from that Iwa guy. Was he really that strong?" "He was a master of earth techniques for sure, and I saw a lot of advanced fire as well. He knew to keep his distance from Neji, too, and like I said before, his taijutsu was even better than Lee's. Bukijutsu wasn't his forte, but with the way he moved and used ninjutsu, I'm not sure it mattered." The girl's expression soured a bit at that admission, though a moment later she was busying herself with the gifted meal. "If he was that good, I'm surprised you guys managed to get away relatively unharmed," Sasuke put in, folding his arms. "Tenten took one of them out before the fight began. If she hadn't, it's likely the result would have been much worse. Team 8 ran into them before us, and they were not as fortunate." Neji shook his head, leaving his food untouched for the time being. "We met Sakura this afternoon. Just her, alone. Her teammates were nearly killed, which left her trying to finish solo." "Sakura's by herself?" Sasuke asked. To the others it might have sounded like a casual inquiry, but Naruto heard the edge in his friend's voice. "How did she manage to escape on her own?" "She's fine," Tenten soothed between bites, correctly interpreting his nonchalance as concern. "Apparently she destroyed the plateau that they had been fighting on and got her teammates out while it was collapsing. I forgot to ask how exactly, but Kiba and Shino had to be evacuated. At least she has enough to survive on between their extra rations, though. That sucks, but I'm glad she's still in to represent her team." Naruto glanced sideways at Hinata, then placed his hand over hers before going on. "We've had pretty good luck, I guess. Just 5 pretty weak teams, and we ran into Team 10 on the first day, but nothing really came of that. We've been here since the second day, using this place as a base more or less. We'd have liked to have done that, but Gaara's team set themselves up in the other one near the northern boundary. It's on a high, isolated mesa," Neji explained, "and there are so many traps set around it that I doubt anyone could get there now. Lee tripped a wire half a kilometer away from it, and we nearly found ourselves turned into pincushions for poison needles." "Sounds like Kankuro's work," Naruto mused. "That's a pretty wide radius to protect against, but I guess that oasis would be easier to find than this one." He fell silent then, letting them eat in peace for a time while he thought. A genin, or maybe not a genin, had taken on and nearly beaten Team Guy by himself, which Naruto knew was beyond his own capabilities. That would be someone to watch out for in the third exam. Most of the Konoha 12 were still in. The only ones that had been knocked out were those who had met the Iwa Nin, at least as far as they knew. He wondered how Shikamaru's team was doing, seeing as they had sought out a hard fight on the first day. "Probably just fine," he reasoned. "They're strong." "It's getting late," Neji said after a while. "We should get moving again if we are to find a suitable place to camp for the night." "Why not stay here with us?" Hinata suggested, but Tenten was smiling and shaking her head as if the offer had been anticipated. "It's a little too cramped in here for 6 people, for one, and we set a goal to eliminate at least one more team before noon tomorrow. We need to redeem ourselves a bit, or as Lee likes to say, return to our springtime of youth." She shared a giggle with Hinata before going on, already standing and brushing off her grimy attire. "We don't want to draw anyone to you, either, so it'd be best to get some distance between us before complete nightfall." "All right, but at least take some stuff with you," Naruto insisted, hopping up to grab another handful of meal packets and canteens to stuff into some of the spare backpacks that they had stacked against the crates. "The oasis would have been enough for us on its own, but 5 teams means a lot of extra food and water we got. It wouldn't be any good for you to pick a fight after skipping breakfast, right? If it were ramen, it would all have been gone already," Sasuke smirked, causing Naruto to scowl half-heartedly. He chortled a second later, Though, it was probably true. You guys are lifesavers, Tenten said by way of thanks, shouldering her pack with a grateful smile. We'll see you tomorrow, and hopefully with a better story to tell. Thank you very much, Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun, Hinata-san. Lee bowed and gave them his signature thumbs up, though a slight wince ruined the effect some. Here, before you go, Hinata started, rising so that she could face the three of them directly and weave a half-dozen hand seals. Sweeten. Soothing mist. She breathed deeply, exhaling the jutsu into a greenish haze around the injured trio. There weren't major wounds, but Naruto knew that she wouldn't have allowed her friends to leave without getting healed first. Everyone's skin smoothed over and mended, Lee's eye gradually returned to normal, and Tenten's lip was brought back to its original state. There was nothing to be done about their clothes, but they did look worlds better than they had upon entering. Thank you again, Hinata-sama, Neji intoned, bowing more deeply this time. Truly, your grace knows no bounds, yours, nor your team's. Sasuke muttered. I put in a vote to knock you out, just so we're clear. He smirked and extended a fist, which each of them gladly wrapped with their own. Naruto did the same, massaging his knuckles after Lee's exuberant response. Be careful, and we'll see you tomorrow. Hinata stepped forward to give Tenten a hug, bowing to the others before moving back to watch them depart one by one. See. Told you it'd be fun, Naruto said slyly, nudging Sasuke before plopping back to the ground. And you got to hear that Sakura was alright, too. He received a punch in the arm for that comment, but it was worth it. That was nice of you to give them supplies in our extra packs, Hinata said as she lowered herself down as well, settling between Naruto's knees so that she could lean back against his chest. And I'm surprised you didn't talk about how you defeated Team 10, or how we've been handling the other teams. Hey, I don't always brag about things, he said in a mock defensive tone. She giggled and titled her head back to kiss his neck, which brought on a warm feeling on top of the one already present from her voiced appreciation. You two could go a night without cuddling, you know, Sasuke interjected, already lying on the bedroll again. Give a guy a break from all the mush. I think Sasuke's missing Sakura a bit, Naruto teased, looking down Hinata. Do you think we should stop for him, to be nice? Hinata tapped her lips, pretending to think for a moment before looking up at him again. I think he'll be okay. Besides, it is our last night in the Badlands. She giggled again before shifting closer for a kiss, Naruto's own laugh bubbling through the gesture. He heard Sasuke groan and shift from across the fire. Tonight was going to be as enjoyable as their other nights together in the wilderness, maybe even more so. Asterisk. The sun was well on its way into the sky by the time Team 7 departed as planned. Sasuke had once again pitched the idea of staying until noon, but this would be their last opportunity to encounter and eliminate teams before the exam ended. It was a low chance given the size of the Badlands, but the odds were increased with Hinata's tremendous range of vision. Remember, she said as they reached the top of the crevasse, if we see any teams from Iowa, we'll avoid them. I guess it's better to be safe, Naruto sighed, rubbing at the back of his neck and letting the chakra flow dissipate from each foot. Climbing out of that place had been awkward due to the narrow pass, requiring them to crawl until it widened enough to stand. I would have liked to see how strong that guy is, though. We'll see him in the arena if he's as good as they said. Come on, my legs are sore from that climb, and I'd rather not fight around this crack. Naruto might fall in. Sasuke shoved him after the playful remark, an action that Naruto returned, just with a touch more force. His friend cursed and missed a step, and then they were off. Team 10 came into sight, but they changed directions after a few hundred meters, Hinata informed them a short while later. It looked like Ino sensed us, but I don't see Choji anywhere. It's just the two of them now. I shouldn't have hit him so hard, Naruto lamented. I bet it was the Rasengan. Even if it was, remember that they're the ones who wanted to fight. Ino's idea or something, right? Sasuke's assertion was somewhat comforting, but Naruto still felt bad. It was incredibly rare for anyone not in the final exam to make Chunin. If Choji didn't get selected, it would likely be Naruto's fault for using more force than was necessary. Worry about it later if you insist on feeling guilty, he continued as they leapt across a shallow valley. It's still possible to get attacked before the exam ends. There's another team heading this way, Hinata started as if on cue. From the mist, she slowed their pace to a walk, glancing aside at her teammates. They don't seem to have sensed us. What do you think we should do? Take them out, Sasuke said evenly, though he sighed and cupped the back of his head with both hands. It's Naruto's turn this time, isn't it? Hell yeah. Sasuke was right. He needed to focus on getting through this exam before fretting over something that couldn't be changed. He could apologize to Choji later. Right now it was time to eliminate some more competition. Be careful, Hinata cautioned, coming to a stop and giving a concerned look. There could be other strong shinobi besides the one from Iwa. I will. You guys are here if I need help, but Kurama and I should be able to handle this no problem. He provided his best reassuring smile, which she responded to with a click of her tongue and a peck on his cheek. Sasuke punched his shoulder. Make it quick. I don't think we have much time left. Naruto checked the sun. It was rapidly approaching its zenith, and he wasn't sure if the proctors would stop the exam in the middle of a fight or not. That feeling is back, the QB rumbled as Sasuke and Hinata retreated a few dozen meters back. I still can't tell what it is, but I know that it isn't good. The one from the first day. Kurama sounded disgruntled, probably because he couldn't figure out the source. A mental nod indicated that it was the same feeling. Do you think we should avoid a fight, then? That's surprisingly mature of you to ask, the fox mused. But no, I don't think that will be necessary. Those two are here in case anything happens. Just stay alert, and use my chakra if something unexpected comes up. That's surprisingly caring of you to say, Naruto teased. Kurama only snorted. The team from Kiri came into view not long after that, running straight towards him as if they had known where to go. The foremost genin, the sole kunoichi, it looked like, pointed and they picked up speed instead of deciding to chat. Naruto grinned. It only ever went one of three ways. A team stopped to talk first, they attempted a surprise attack, or just ran straight towards them. The first was mostly amusing, the second never worked thanks to Hinata's Byakugan, and the last was his favorite. No chit-chat, no complicated maneuvers, just straight into combat. As expected, the kunoichi continued straight while her two cohorts broke off to circle wide, no doubt heading to engage Hinata and Sasuke. That wouldn't be happening today. Naruto let loose two fists of shuriken, forcing them to dodge back. He let a kunai fly at the one heading for him, just to make sure he had their attention. Hey, I'm your first obstacle. If you can get past me, you can fight my friends. He called, lowering into a balanced Goken stance. Hinata says not to use more chakra than necessary, so I'll just start with taijutsu. He wasn't sure that he could take on 3 people at once without a clone, but it was worth a shot. Unfortunately, it appeared that this team wasn't the most balanced in terms of ability. They were all close combat specialists. The outside genin swept towards him immediately, more than glad to take the opportunity to outnumber their adversary. They held no weapons that he could see, but the kunoichi reached him first, and she wielded a set of kamas like she knew how to use them. In a flash Naruto had his kunai out, and as soon as the other two arrived, the melee was on. The trio of Kiri nin were good, but only as far as a standard genin was expected to be. It was the same situation as the previously defeated teams, slightly disappointing. Even with 3 attackers, Naruto was able to avoid nearly every attack, those that he allowed to land only glancing off of a shoulder or leg. But there were 3 of them, and with 3 attacking in unison it was impossible to dodge, block, and attack all at the same time. This was really just a test. He had wanted to see if it was possible to keep up with all 3 at once. After realizing that it was, he decided to finish quickly like Sasuke had suggested. Between one weave and the next he created a clone behind the kunoichi, its foot catching the base of her skull in a flash and sending her tumbling off to one side while Naruto swept the other's legs. Their leader getting instantly knocked out of the skirmish had caught them off guard, and their faltering spelled the fight's end. The Bunshin pivoted to land a second straight kick into the side of one genin, and Naruto finished the fight by bringing a heel down hard on the other's back. The boy hit the ground hard, head bouncing back from the impact on the rocks. They were both out cold. Man, I was hoping for something a little more exciting, Naruto sighed. I wonder who put together a team like this, with 2 taijutsu users and 1. Naruto, look out. Hinata's cry jerked his head to one side, and time seemed slow down. The kunoichi was lying a ways off, propped up on one arm while the other was extended towards him, a kunai long since flung from her fingers. The weapon was so close that he could make out the ridges on the grip, and the deadly point flashing in the sun only a few centimeters from his face. There wasn't time to think, let alone move. His pride and negligence had caused him to err, and he was just lucky that there was still a way to survive this. Kurama's chakra sprang out to meet the blade, catching and deflecting it a hair's breadth from Naruto's temple. He took a step back on impulse, and then blinked. The Kyuubi was growling, sounding genuinely angry. Something was wrong, and he woke up. Naruto blinked, and then blinked again. Sasuke's Sharingan were staring down at him, and he could feel the cold stone beneath his back. Why was he on the ground? He had been standing up just now, using Kurama's chakra to catch the kunai, and then, he was on the ground. There was no time in between. What? He started, trying to move and immediately regretting it. It felt like something was pounding on the inside of his skull. The pain receded after a few seconds, but he was dizzy now. Really dizzy. Why am I on the ground? I didn't think he'd remember, Sasuke muttered, rising from where he had been kneeling just beside Naruto. I got it back under control, though. I don't think he's hurt, but you might want to check. Naruto, Hinata said from his other side. She sounded worried. Much more worried than he was used to. Are you okay? What happened? A familiar green light began soothing the pain away as her face came into view, looking pale and every bit as anxious as her voice had implied. There was blood on her cheek. I'm fine, he said slowly. Just a headache. And nothing happened. Why is there blood on you? Did one of them get back up? She bit her lower lip and shook her head, glancing up at Sasuke, who was scowling as severely as Naruto had ever seen. Seriously, what happened? Take a look, the other boy said grimly, gesturing vaguely around them. Kurama went berserk. What? No way. Naruto protested, struggling against his throbbing skull to sit up. His jaw dropped open, and dread began creeping in to take a firm hold. Blood. The area surrounding them was so thoroughly coated that the snow and stone may as well have been painted red. Scraps of torn clothing were littered about, and a mist headband lay twisted and broken not far off. Something was laying off to one side, and it looked far too much like a severed arm. No, not severed, torn, like it had been ripped off at the shoulder. A wave of nausea hit him. Did I? It wasn't you, Sasuke answered flatly, still surveying the bloodstained area. That was 100% Kurama, and not the same one that helped us during the last set of exams. It was like he went insane. Went straight to 4 tails, and I'm pretty sure I saw a 5th before your skin started peeling off. I don't really know what he sounds like normally, but it seemed like he was roaring, and it was the angriest thing I've ever heard. You didn't kill anyone, Hinata said quickly, as if she heard the unasked question. A bit of the tightness in Naruto's chest released. A bit. It was close, but Sasuke and I managed to get the barrier around you fast enough. I don't have the right training to reattach her arm, but Sasuke cauterized the wound and someone else should be able to fix it. Naruto craned his neck to look around them, spotting the 3 genin on the ground behind her. The girl was covered in blood and deathly pale, but breathing. Her teammates were still unconscious, but otherwise unharmed. What the hell happened? Naruto demanded, but after a few seconds he realized that Kurama was dormant. The fox wasn't gone, nor was he really sleeping, but it was like he had lost consciousness somehow and couldn't reply. For some reason, that scared Naruto more than anything else. I can't contact him, he began hollowly. His throat felt tight. It's like he passed out or something. Did you see anything, Sasuke? Not much, he admitted, lighting a flare and tossing it high into the air. Well, Kurama, almost broke out of the barrier before we could see to those 3, and the moment I saw you I just went in and severed the connection like before. Kurama shook his head a few times, and then just collapsed. I came back out right after. It doesn't make sense. I was in a hurry to block that kunai, but I barely called enough to get one tail out, and I didn't even feel a surge like I might have when taking on too much. The glow of Hinata's technique faded, and he carefully got to his feet with her help. He said right before that he could feel something strange, like a bad feeling. It happened before, on the first day. And you didn't tell us? Sasuke asked, incredulous. Don't you think that might have been important to mention? We agreed that there wasn't anything we could do about it, so there wasn't a reason to worry you, and I honestly forgot about it until today. The other boy scowled and muttered something under his breath about hindsight. Naruto grimaced. He already felt guilty enough without someone else pointing out what should have been done. Hinata's hand found his and squeezed hard, expressing concern and reassurance at the same time. I'll talk to Jiraiya as soon as the exam is over, and to Kurama when he wakes up. If he wakes up. The thought was an ominous one. He had gotten used to the QB being inside of him, having conversations and gaining knowledge. Having him gone was almost like losing a friend, however odd that seemed. Well, this is a mess, Enko whistled, snapping their attention to where she was surveying the downed genin. I got the report about what happened, but I figured it had been exaggerated. Unfortunately not. Sasuke stepped forward and picked up the kunoichi's arm, unconcerned about the blood dripping from it. We only had time to stop the bleeding, and Hinata fixed the major internal damage, but she needs to be transported to the hospital immediately. Really? I thought she might just need a bandage, the Jonin drawled, gingerly lifting the girl as a pair of chunin arrived to retrieve the others. Give me that, she continued, snatching the limb. We only had half an hour left until the exam's conclusion. Couldn't you have avoided mangling someone? She sounded annoyed now instead of her usual jovial self. Naruto averted his gaze. I'm sorry, Anko-sensei. It was an accident. There isn't any room for accidents in the ninja world, kid, she said dryly. You're strong. Hell, you're terrifyingly strong, but power that can't be controlled is power to be feared, not respected. Remember that. Don't just stand around. She barked at her associates. Let's get these three to the infirmary, pronto. They disappeared using the body flicker jutsu, leaving Team 7 standing in the middle of a swath of gore, alone. As shitty as that was, Sasuke said finally, breaking the uncomfortable silence, we still got rid of one more team before the exam ended, and managed to go the whole way without a casualty. Even though we're probably the only team that would go out of our way to save an enemy's life, he finished in a grumble. They're not enemies, Hinata said distractedly. This is just an aptitude test, and if we can finish it without unnecessary deaths then we will. Naruto. She gave his hand another squeeze, but he could only shake his head. There's nothing we can do about it now. Let's just find somewhere to wait until the time's up. We should have stayed at the oasis after all. He could see her out of the corner of his eye, distressed and wanting to say something to help. He was glad that she didn't, though, talking was hard right now, and he wasn't sure how to respond to encouragement. Everything felt wrong, and he still felt so disoriented. They located a nearby gully to rest in, settling down to wait until noon. Sasuke and Hinata talked in spurts, guessing how many people might have made it through, especially with the rule allowing individuals to drop out, and wondering who they would have to fight in the finals, assuming that they were set up the same as last time. Naruto hardly heard a word, too lost in his own thoughts. They should have fought as a team, and then all of this could have been avoided. It was his pride that got in the way of that decision, even if Kurama had supported it. The QB was more prideful than any human he had met, so of course he wouldn't have seen a problem. But why had he collapsed like that? What had happened? He was the QB, after all. And you would be wise not to forget it. He shivered. Could Kurama have done it on purpose? A chunin is coming, Hinata said, a plume of smoke appearing nearby almost before she finished speaking. The same one-eyed shinobi that had served as their guide appeared, nodding in greeting before beckoning them to follow. There weren't any kind half-smiles to be had now. He even looked a bit on edge, and his eye flicked to Naruto more than once before he turned to lead the way out. They followed in silence, heading south at a good clip until they reached the barrier closest to the base camp. A pair of proctors already had a section open for them to pass through, and before long they were descending back towards the tents that they had departed from 6 days prior. There were already a fair number of genin present, though nowhere near as many as had set out. Team Guy, Shikamaru, Ino, Gaara and his siblings, and a grass nin were standing around, either resting or talking. Yo, Shikamaru hailed as they approached, one eyebrow raised. That blood is pretty fresh. I take it you ran into a problem near the end. Something like that, Sasuke shrugged. The Nara boy took the hint, nodding once before changing subjects. We convinced Choji to drop out after he took one too many hits from that kunoichi over there, he continued, nodding towards the Kusanin. We got her teammates, but she's some kind of expert with traps and played us right into her hands. Have you all seen Sakura? We heard from Neji that she had to get Shino and Kiba out. Naruto shook his head. He was glad that he hadn't been the cause of Choji's expulsion, but it was only a minor consolation in the face of his current problems. Gaara approached with Konkuro and Tamari, Team Guy just behind. I felt it, Gaara said simply, his gaze steady on Naruto. What went wrong? We don't know, Hinata replied after Naruto failed to reply. I think we're going to need some time to figure it out. The other Jinchuriki tilted his head to one side, nodded, and turned to leave, his confused-looking brother and sister trailing behind and casting glances over their shoulders. Lee had one fist raised, his face the epitome of passionate worry. Neji and Tenten both appeared troubled, but they thankfully didn't inquire any further. Naruto didn't have any answers to give at the moment. A single mist genin arrived a few minutes later, and Sakura dropped into their midst seconds after. She had bags under her eyes and was slouching a bit, tottering as she approached as if wholly exhausted. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, Sasuke moved to support her with one arm, muttering things under his breath that Naruto couldn't make out. Whatever was said had her smiling and shaking her head. I'm fine, Sasuke-kun, only ready to sleep for a week. I kept running into trouble after Shino and Kiba were taken out. I doubt I slept more than a few hours these last 3 days. Tenten said you destroyed a plateau to get away, Ino said, already next to the other girl and fussing over the state of her clothes. Care to enlighten us as to what she means by that? I demolished the plateau, she shrugged, wincing with the action. I didn't see a way of escaping unless I created a lot of confusion. So you demolished an entire plateau? Ino sounded a mix between quizzical and astounded. How? I punched it, of course. Sakura grinned then, showing a fierceness that had been hidden by extreme fatigue. What else did you expect? Ino shook her head, looking a touch faint. There, Neji murmured, nodding to the newest arrivals. They both wore Hitai-8 from the hidden stone, and one of them was frankly enormous. Everything about him spoke of power, from his tremendous height, almost twice that of Naruto's own, to the corded muscles worked throughout his entire body. He wore only baggy trousers and a sash for a belt, and appeared to have taken no damage whatsoever during the exam. The other young man walking at his side was in a similar condition, only much closer to a normal-sized person. He does look tough, Naruto commented, welcoming a distraction from his thoughts. He had never seen a shinobi so massive in his life. A punch from him would hurt even without chakra put into it. I wonder what he ate to get so big. I'm not sure how strong he is, but the smaller one is who you need to worry about. He isn't a normal genin, if he is one at all. Naruto eyed Neji askance. He knew that size meant almost nothing to a seasoned ninja, but the news had caught him off guard. Either way, he was more concerned about fighting against them without Kurama's help. He was plenty strong without, but if one of them really was a Chunin or Jonin in disguise, it was unlikely he could win without the Biju cloak. That's everyone, Enko called, drawing their attention to a boulder next to the tent's entrance. She stood atop it, feet set wide with one fist on her hip and the other hand clutching a rolled parchment. I would have liked one or two less, but you all earned your places here, and you managed to knock out enough to avoid preliminaries. Well done. Now, one of the proctors is going to walk through with a basket containing 16 cards, the number of participants who completed the second exam. Choose one at random, siphon a sliver of chakra into it, and a number will show up. Hold on to it until everyone has their own, and don't even think about trying to trade with anyone. I'm watching you. She ended the speech there, watching as the indicated chunin began shifting through the victorious genin. Is this how it went last time? Naruto asked quietly, eyeing the basket as it wove closer. More or less. I guess there will be 8 first-round matches instead of 5 like last time. Well, 4 since Dosu didn't show up. Come to think of it, I never saw him after the preliminaries, Shikamaru mused. I killed him, Gaara said from behind them, voice toneless as always. In my defense, he did seek me out in a pitiful assassination attempt. Naruto couldn't help but smirk slightly at that. Not long ago the other boy would have been completely unapologetic for that, not even bothering with the defense. It was a testament to the new person he was striving to be. 8. Hinata murmured, drawing his attention back to the proctor. Sasuke was reaching into the basket now, withdrawing a card and revealing a large number 3 on its surface. The chunin offered the basket to Naruto last. 2. Guess that means none of us will be fighting in the first round, right? They all knew that the time would come for at least 2 of them to fight, though it was more than less likely that one of them would have to fight the other 2 at some point. Alright, line up from lowest to highest, starting on my right. Have your cards out and turn facing me so that I can see. Anko jumped down from her perch, landing in front of the large rock as another pair of chunin arrived with a large chalkboard. She started drawing brackets while they formed a line, and by the time the last blank slot was etched onto the board they had finished. Sasuke and Gaara were immediately to Naruto's right, whereas Shikamaru, Kankuro, and the supposedly dangerous Iwa Nin were on his left. This was going to be a difficult group. Super. Anko continued, spinning to face them. Obviously I'm only going to fill in the first matchups, but I provided the remaining blanks so that you'll be able to see who you will be up against depending on which genin wins each bout. There will be 8 fights to start out, where the winners of adjacent groups will fight and advance to the next round. Well, of course that's how it'll work. You kids know what a bracket is. She guffawed and tapped the blackboard with the chalk a few times before beginning to scribble names, starting at the top with Shikamaru and Hinata, the smaller stone shinobi. Nara Shikamaru vs. Hinata. Kankuro vs. Uzumaki Naruto. Gaara vs. Uchiha Sasuke. Hyuga Neji vs. Chiyuta. Haruno Sakura vs. Rock Lee. Aki vs. Tamari. Tenten vs. Yamanaka Ino. Uka vs. Hyuga Hinata. Take a good look at your neighbors, because while you're most certainly going to fight one of them, the finalists will have to take on 4 consecutive opponents before the end. Not a word was spoken for a full minute, each genin doubtless going through the same process that Naruto was in his mind. Shikamaru fights that strong guy first, which means I'll probably be against him in the next round. Kankuro isn't weak, but I shouldn't have a problem overpowering him, even without Kurama. It looked like Gaara and Sasuke were going to have their first round rematch, and the winner of that would face off against Neji most likely. Lee would undoubtedly take a win against Sakura, although if she managed to land one punch. Hinata's group looks pretty tame, though she'll probably have to fight Lee after Tenten. There would be a lot of friends, or at least good acquaintances, pitted against one another here, although they must have been prepared for that. Team 7 was. You have 1 week to recover and prepare, Anko went on. We have accelerated rehabilitation rooms available at the hospital due to the time constraints, reserved for participants in this exam that need to be fixed up quickly. Other than that, I've got nothing else to tell you. Show up at the stadium 1 week from today with whatever supplies and tools you'll need, 8 o'clock sharp. Dismissed. Well, this is going to be troublesome, Shikamaru grumbled as everyone began dispersing into teams again. I'll need to talk to Sakura and Team Guy about that Hinata guy to work out a strategy. I knew getting a bye in the last exams was going to come back to haunt me. Neji, you have his teammate, right? Yes, the older boy replied, arriving with a thoroughly distraught Lee. Tenten was off to one side talking rather amiably with Ino, most likely about their upcoming match. I don't think I will have an issue with him. I don't want to fight Sakura-san. Lee looked to be on the verge of tears, his eyes like watery saucers while he looked in dismay at the kunoichi in question. She was back next to Sasuke now, letting him help support her again. That'd better be because you're scared, she said, raising a clenched fist. Or do you think I can't take you on? He waved his hands frantically as if to say that wasn't the case, and she devolved into a fit of giggles while he began tripping over his own tongue trying to explain something about virtue and passion. Don't worry, Lee Senpai. I'll do my best, and I don't expect you to go easy on me either. He still looked unsettled, but could only nod and hang his head. Careful with that Mist Kunoichi, Hinata-chan, she continued, turning to the other girl. She was one that I ran into yesterday, keeps her distance and uses some advanced genjutsu alongside more projectiles than I've ever seen Sasuke-kun use. Thank you, Hinata smiled. I'll have to ask you for more detail this week. I think we all have our work cut out for us with such a short time to prepare. Ready for our rematch, Gaara? Sasuke asked, and Naruto was surprised not to hear even a hint of cheekiness. Gaara turned from talking to his siblings, smiled that shadow of a smile and nodded, then went back to his private discussions. I'm looking forward to our group, he continued, starting off with Sakura back towards Konoha. That Iwa Nin, Naruto, Gaara, and Neji. It'll be interesting at the very least. Ready to fight in the third round? Naruto asked with a grin that felt more characteristic of his usual self. They had walked far enough away from the rest that he wasn't at risk of offending anyone by assuming he and Sasuke would make it to the end. Ready to kick your ass? The Uchiha smirked, though his expression dulled a bit soon after. Whoever wins has to fight Hinata, though. Part of me really wants to see your girlfriend beat you in the final match. I'm not guaranteed to win, Sasuke, Hinata put in, though she held an amused expression nonetheless. From what Naruto said, Ino has improved a lot since the last set of exams, but I think Tenten will win still. If. You don't have to look at me like that, Naruto. It is an if, she said in response to his look. He hadn't been making a face. Probably. If I win, I'll have to fight against Sakura, Lee, Temari, or the shinobi from the grass, Aki, I think. You'll win, and you'll be fighting Lee, Sasuke said with all of the nonchalance in the world. Maybe he didn't see Sakura's gaze turn to ice, but he kept going as if she wasn't centimeters away and staring daggers. Lee is faster than me with 4 gates opened, and I know that just a few months ago he could open 5, even if briefly. I've seen him fell trees with kicks and crush boulders with his punches in that state. I don't know anything about the Kusanin, but if I'm not confident that I could beat him myself, I don't think the other 3 have a chance. You know, Sasuke-kun, Sakura began sweetly, dangerously. There are some parts of you that are irresistible, and then others that could use some pruning. Naruto wasn't sure, but he thought that he saw Sasuke swallow a bit harder than normal. Uchiha. Kurama's quiet rumble stopped Naruto in his tracks, prompting the others to pause and glance in his direction. What? Kurama, are you awake? Do you remember what happened? Naruto could feel the fox all of a sudden, like a wave of panic, fury, and confusion. They were not emotions that he would normally associate with the Kyuubi, and that made him increasingly uneasy. Those damned eyes. Uchiha eyes. That was all. Kurama shifted as if in a restless slumber, then went quiet again, leaving Naruto with a chill running down his spine. What is it? Hinata asked concernedly, casting around briefly before lowering her voice. Kurama. Yeah, I think he woke up for just a second. Naruto wasn't sure how to say what needed to be said, but he pointedly avoided Sasuke's eyes. There was only one Uchiha alive aside from his friend as far as anyone knew. He said. Well, I think he was trying to say that. What? Sasuke asked, raising an eyebrow. Naruto took a deep breath. We need to go see Tsunade-sama. It was a Sharingan. Chapter 31. Eyes of the Unknown. I'm telling you that it's impossible, Sasuke said for the 100th time. Naruto scowled. This debate had persisted all the way back to Konoha, through the streets and now outside of the Hokage's office, and the other boys seemed to have no intention of giving in. And I'm telling you that it's what Kurama said. Naruto tried to keep his tone even, but some frustration made its way through despite his best efforts. He knew that Sasuke wasn't accusing him of lying, but couldn't the jerk just accept what was plain to see? Possible or not, it happened. He went crazy. almost killed someone, and was muttering about a Sharingan right afterward. There's nothing else that it could have been unless somebody messed with the seal, and I would have felt that. And you would have seen a Sharingan if it had been that, too, Sasuke pressed. The QB can't be manipulated by dojutsu unless there's a meeting of the eyes, and if your eyes didn't see a Sharingan, then his couldn't have either. I told you that I don't remember what happened after the kunai. It could have happened right after that. Me and Hinata would have seen whoever it was, and I sure as hell would have noticed another Uchiha nearby, don't you think? You too, Hinata inserted in a gentle yet firm voice. Please don't argue. We're all confused and trying to figure out what happened. Sasuke, Naruto is only giving you the information he has. It's possible that Kurama was mistaken, after all. And Naruto, he isn't doubting your word. It's just a troubling implication if it really was a Sharingan. Troubling is putting it lightly, Sasuke grunted, though after a moment he folded his arms and muttered, sorry. It's fine. Naruto sighed and ran a hand through his hair, ending with an irritated scratch at the back of his head. I shouldn't be getting mad at you. I'm just annoyed when I don't know what's going on, and I'm afraid they're going to do something to Kurama if we can't prove it wasn't my fault. We know it wasn't your fault, Hinata put in, but he shook his head. We do, but they don't. Hinata, if they decide that I'm a liability, then they could tighten the seal, and I don't want to let that happen to Kurama. That wasn't even considering how it would affect him. The loss of the fox's chakra would certainly be a blow to his overall power, though he was confident that he was still strong enough without it to make it through the third exam. More than anything else, he didn't want to go back on his word. He and Kurama had made a pact, and he never broke promises. The door to Tsunade's office opened before his friends could respond, and surprisingly it wasn't Shizune who beckoned them in. An Anbu agent looked down at them from behind a cat mask, its green stripes reminiscent of whiskers. Come in. The Hokage has been expecting you. A toneless voice accompanied by the blank porcelain face made for an unnerving impression. Naruto took a deep breath and stepped forward, but not before Hinata slipped a hand into his. An inordinate amount of paperwork lay scattered about the desk across the room, and an agitated Tsunade was scribbling furiously in an attempt to make a dent in it. She didn't look up when they entered, opting to finish whatever document had her attention at the moment. The door closed, and the man took up position in front of it. Ward the room, Tsunade barked absently, causing Naruto to jump. He heard the Anbu murmur a few words, but that was all. Seconds passed, stretching into minutes, with the only sound being the scratching of quill pen on paper. Naruto shared a glance with Hinata, and then with Sasuke, who only shrugged. Anyo, Tsunade-sama, we're here because. I know why you're here, she snapped, practically throwing the stylus into its inkwell. Black droplets splattered over a few pages, but she appeared not to notice. It's already causing me the headache of the century, if you hadn't noticed. Is the mist that mad? Sasuke asked, earning him a mirthless laugh from Tsunade. Why would the mist be angry that you stopped one of their genin from dying? She shook her head, disgusted. No, although they expressed serious concerns about Naruto's participation in the exams. You're lucky they think you were in control the whole time, or else they'd be demanding you be locked up. How did you know it wasn't on purpose? Naruto blurted out. She raised an eyebrow as if to ask, do you think I'm stupid? Kid, you've pretty much proven that you don't know how to take a life without reason. If you had been in control, you would have done the same thing you'd been doing through the whole second stage, incapacitate, and inflict the least amount of harm possible. He let out a breath that he didn't remember holding, relieved that she hadn't thought the worst. Now, what I do want to know is how it happened, and then I'll decide what we need to do about it. Naruto nodded, only hesitating a second before launching into the tale. It didn't take long, although Sasuke and Hinata had to fill in the bits from when he had been unconscious. By the time they finished, Tsunade was up and pacing by the windows. I don't know how he could have seen a Sharingan when I didn't, but that's what I heard him say afterwards, Naruto concluded. I didn't see anything on the monitors, either, and none of the proctors or Anbu station nearby sensed or saw anything out of the ordinary. She paused mid-stride, glancing aside at him curiously. You said the last thing you saw was the kunai. He nodded. Let Kakashi in. he's trying to listen outside. Her statement was directed over their heads, and a beat later the agent opened the door. Kakashi strolled in, pausing to murmur something to the other man. Naruto thought he caught a salutation, but he couldn't be certain. You can have a reunion some other time, give me your input. Tsunade-sama, the Jonin intoned, bowing when he came even with his subordinates. I can't be certain, but I believe it was the kunai. What? How? Sasuke asked, turning to regard their instructor. What's a knife have to do with it? I was one of the proctors stationed nearby, he continued, shrugging. I watched as many of your fights as I could, with my Sharingan. You might have seen more than I did if yours had been active, Sasuke. The boy in question scowled furiously, no doubt upset that he hadn't been so attentive. It was only a flicker, but it looked like something was done to the kunai in the middle of its flight. At the time I passed it off as the girl's failed genjutsu, but now I suspect it was something else. Image projection? Tsunade asked, leaning over the back of her chair. Kakashi tilted his head to one side before nodding thoughtfully. It's a possibility, but I don't know of anyone skilled enough with that type of ninjutsu to pull off an elaborate maneuver like that, let alone go completely undetected. The Hokage's eyes flicked to the Anbu agent, who nodded and muttered another technique. What about en route? Kakashi didn't move save to raise an eyebrow, but the tension in the room increased noticeably. Those old fools convinced me to let Danzo handle some of the more sensitive security measures during this set of exams. I've never liked him, but Sarutobi-sensei trusted and worked with him, and I wanted to make certain that nothing went wrong this time. Nothing on that scale again, at least. I can't say. Kakashi shrugged after a time, crossing his arms and thinking. Itachi was the only Uchiha I worked with, and I'd have known if there were others, or even any who had obtained a Sharingan like me. Tsunade nodded, her eyes traveling to the other man, who shook his head. My apologies, Hokage-sama. My experience was the same. Nothing seen, nothing to be done, she tisked. Naruto, I know you don't want to hear this with the third exam only days away, but I am forbidding you from using Kurama's power until further notice. Understood. Naruto tensed, but there was nothing he could say. This was a far better result than the worst case, but also pretty far from the best result. He gave a tight nod, which Tsunade returned before regarding the Anbu again. Tenzo, from here on out you will follow Naruto wherever he goes and report back to me. At the slightest hint of Kurama's chakra being used, I want you to contain it, even if it means interrupting a match. I expect you to help, Kakashi. Yes, Tsunade-sama, Kakashi agreed, though he sounded a touch reluctant. Hinata, Sasuke, she went on, sinking back to the chair and looking far more tired than before. I'll need your eyes as well leading up to and during the final exam. I know you have your own training to do as well as your own fights to win, but the more people we have looking then the better odds we have of catching the perpetrator. The pair in question provided solemn nods, and Naruto felt Hinata's hand briefly tighten in his own. Good. Now get home and rest up, and congratulations on passing the second exam, she smirked. Not that I expected anything less. We'll meet at the usual spot at sunrise, Kakashi said as they turned to leave. I need to speak with Tsunade-sama, so don't wait up. Yes, sensei, they said in unison, exiting together. It was going to be a long, troubled walk back home. What do you think the chances are that this wasn't a Sharingan, and instead something to make it look like one? Tsunade sighed, steepling her fingers. As far as we know, aside from Sasuke, you and Itachi are the only two still alive with that particular visual prowess, and with all of the added precautions I doubt Itachi could have slipped through. There's something that I've been bothered by recently, Kakashi admitted slowly. This had been in the back of his mind for months, but today's events had brought it to the forefront of his worried thoughts. When Kurama emerged from Naruto during the last exams, he said two things just before disappearing that, in hindsight, seemed suspect. He called me a Jonin that holds no grudge from my unwilling attack, and Sasuke, an Uchiha whose eyes don't seek to control my power. Given the circumstances, I think it's possible that there's another rogue Uchiha out there somewhere, one whose Sharingan is strong enough to control a Biju. That attack happened before the Uchiha clan was massacred, Tsunade pointed out. One of them could have done it. With all due respect to the deceased, I don't believe any of them could have managed that feat. They were relegated to a corner of the village shortly afterwards, which bred considerable contention between them and the village leadership. I believe that, if Kurama's words are to be taken literally, the Uchiha responsible for drawing him out of Kushina and forcing the attack on Konoha would have gotten to Naruto in the succeeding years if they were inside of the village. I think it's best to assume that there's another out there, he concluded, troubled by his own claims. If there really was an Uchiha out there with the strength and intelligence to pull out the Kyuubi, potentially craft a sealing contract, and whose Sharingan could force Kurama to their will, then there were far more frightening things in the world than he had thought. I thought you said that Sasuke's was the most powerful you'd ever seen, discounting the Mangekyo, of course. Itachi is a tremendously skilled shinobi, but I was under the impression that his younger brother was more adept at using the dojutsu. That's still correct by my assessment, but that doesn't mean one more powerful doesn't exist just because I haven't seen it, Kakashi stated dryly. Jiraiya might know more than I do. He hesitated. And Danzo might know something we don't as well. As questionable a person as he was, Danzo did operate Konoha's most top-secret organization. If they couldn't figure something out, then perhaps the village's underworld could. That man. Tsunade tisked again, but nodded. I'll see what he knows. But Kakashi, she went on seriously. He straightened. This tone was familiar, but not from the sitting Hokage. Hiruzen had become a master of using that voice, and Kakashi knew it for one that was reserved for only the heaviest matters. I'm under a great deal of pressure to solve this problem, and not just from our village leaders. Since the world became aware of Naruto's identity, he's been the target of more than just a handful of assassination and kidnapping attempts, and for the record, he isn't to know about this. That's an order. I've thwarted a few myself, Kakashi said, recalling the assailants he had eliminated over the last few months. He had been planning to tell Team 7 about them after the stresses of this exam were gone, but now. You knew that. We've been tracking spies from almost every nation, aside from the Sand, of course. There has always been a threat to Konoha's Jinchuriki, ever since Uzumaki Mito became the first. I'd guess that we have Anbu still trying to identify the other village's vessels. There had always been teams out on long-term missions when he had been among Konoha's Black Ops, and oftentimes they returned one or two short. The difference here is that the other villages know who our Jinchuriki is already, and all of them are taking one of two positions, threatening, or very threatening. She snatched a paper from her desk and waved it at him. This is from the Cloud. It's a blunt borderline declaration of war hinging on our control of the Kyuubi. And this one. She snagged another document, almost crumpling it into a fist. From the Mizukage. She expressed her deepest sympathies and made sure I knew that we could rely on them for help if we needed a more secure method of controlling our Biju. Oh, and this. The parchment she had been scribbling on just a few minutes ago found its way to the door, whizzing past Kakashi and thudding against the thick wooden frame, pinned by a kunai. That is a formal request from Kumogakure asking that we kindly reseal the Kyuubi into a more suitable container, glossing over the fact that the death of the current host will be regrettable. That's not the half of it, and that isn't even including the flood of angry demands from our own villagers and shinobi that something be done. It hasn't stopped since the Sands invasion. The room was quiet after Tsunade's rant, leaving her to massage temples that likely ached from having to deal with all of this. In truth, Kakashi didn't know what to say. He knew that there had been significant public outrage directed at Naruto for the events of that day, despite the fact that Kurama's actions had saved countless more lives than they took. But he had expected the truth, while hard to swallow, to come through eventually. It was troubling that there were many who still felt wronged, and very telling of the villagers' mentalities. It was sad, but they couldn't be judged too harshly. Oftentimes people weren't able to see past their own biases. If something happens during the next portion of the exam, I'll be forced to take action. The Hokage didn't sound like she was giving a warning, but rather like she was resigned to act in the worst-case scenario. Kaharu and Homura have given me suggestions in case of that occurrence, but if it comes to pass I'll leave the decision up to you. Kakashi blinked. Me. Tsunade nodded. You. There is no one who has more of a right and responsibility to that decision than you. I can sit in this chair and sign decrees and give people orders all day long, but I don't know Naruto like you do, and it would be unfair of me to pass such a judgment on my own. I just hope that it won't come to that. Kakashi saw himself out not long after, a dark cloud forming in his thoughts. It was difficult to identify exactly which piece of information felt wrong, seeing as almost everything discussed didn't sit right. One thing was clear, however. They were fortunate to have Tsunade on their side. Naruto might not have realized it yet, but the Hokage had been in his corner from the beginning. She had given him the benefit of the doubt without it being requested, and had given Kakashi full agency regarding his fate. That was as much as giving permission for the whole of Team 7, Iruka, and Haku to give their input as well. I wish you could have lived to tell me more about these eyes, Obito. I could use a bit of advice right now. Kakashi sighed, pocketing his hands and beginning an aimless walk away from Tsunade's office. Well, perhaps not entirely aimless. There was a certain old man he could always count on for good counsel, and having an eternal rival to bounce ideas off of wasn't so bad either. Asterisk. Of course I don't mind if they stay here, Iruka assured. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief, though he hadn't expected anything less from the man after explaining what had happened during the exam. Sasuke had told him in no uncertain terms that he would be staying over for the next few days, just in case. He offhandedly mentioned that Haku would be gone this week on his first mission, which certainly didn't have anything to do with it. Are you sure that you're alright? And how's Kurama? I'm fine, and I won't know how he is until he wakes up, I guess. Naruto unfastened his white cloak and hung it on a peg, and Hinata promptly retrieved it along with the black coat that he shrugged out of. Those need to be washed first, she chided, adding her own cloak to the pile before turning to Sasuke. He rolled his eyes and surrendered his own. Sorry, Hinata. Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I guess I'm not really thinking straight still. It's all right, she smiled, already starting off down the hall. You two take showers first, and leave your clothes in the hall. I'll start the laundry. Hinata, I can do that, Iruka chided, but she shook her head. You already have dinner cooking, Iruka-sensei. I'll be out to help after I get cleaned up, I promise. She was gone after a quickly bobbed bow, leaving Iruka shaking his head. You kids. He sighed, glancing at the two boys still standing in the entryway. Well, you heard the boss. Get cleaned up and ready for dinner. We're having yakisoba, fried dumplings, tuna sashimi, and I tried my hand at making sushi earlier. It's all vegetarian, but I think it turned out pretty well. He strolled back to the kitchen, humming all the way, leaving Naruto to make a face at the prospect of vegetables surrounded by nothing but rice and seaweed. Naruto won a quick round of rock paper scissors to take a shower first, bringing his clothes to Hinata rather than just tossing them into the hallway. She got oddly flustered when he stepped into the tiny laundry room to drop them off, even though he had a towel securely tied about his waist. He just grinned. Hinata was funny about those kinds of things. Showers were taken in short order, and before long they had all taken seats at the table to a wonderful spread. Iruka had casually listed off the items for tonight's menu, but he had really outdone himself this time. All of the dishes looked like they ought to have been served in a fancy restaurant, with a taste to match the presentation. Naruto even surprised himself by enjoying the sushi, although it did require heavy doses of soy sauce. Dessert hadn't been left out either. Iruka always said that no meal was complete without something sweet, and so he brought out a platter of chilled daifuku that had been made fresh that morning. After a day like today, there could have been no better way to come home. You didn't have to do the dishes, Sasuke, Iruka tried to scold afterwards, but the Uchiha only shrugged on his way to the den to join Naruto and Hinata, who had already moved in after helping clean up and brewing some tea. But thank you all the same. Thanks for the meal, Iruka-sensei, he replied, and for letting me stay. I'll need to get your recipe for that bean paste. Sakura's been bugging me to make her something, and I think that'll do the trick. Sure thing, the Chunin smirked. Are you and Sakura dating now? Sasuke missed a step, though he recovered so smoothly that it might have been Naruto's imagination. Ah, not really. It's complicated. Sakura's a nice girl, and I know she likes you plenty. I know I don't need to tell you not to wait too long before making your feelings clear, if that's what you mean by complicated, anyway. Iruka chuckled when a bit of red rose in the boy's cheeks, and then went back to tidying up. Naruto hid a slight grin, one that had not come about due to his friend's embarrassment. No, it wasn't that. It was just great to see that Iruka cared so much about his students to offer honest and valuable advice. He was the perfect parent to a bunch of kids who, for a good portion of their young lives, hadn't belonged to a complete family. So, what's the plan? Sasuke asked, dropping onto the couch at Naruto's side opposite Hinata. Iruka said I'm welcome to the couch, though I don't see why that's necessary when there'll be a spare bed somewhere. He leaned back and laced his fingers behind his head, relaxing. And don't even try to deny it. Naruto started, scratching behind one ear and glancing at Hinata. She was very pointedly looking away and at nothing in particular. You're just gonna have to be happy with the couch, sorry. Sasuke closed his eyes and grunted in assent, the slightest twitch of his lips indicating some amusement. Anyway, I'm not sure what to do about Kurama. He's still not awake, and I'm a little worried. Want me to go in and wake him up? Sasuke suggested, opening one eye and activating his Sharingan preemptively. I think I could bring Hinata in, too. You could? She asked, attention back on the conversation. How? Just a hunch, he shrugged. I've gotten the hang of getting in and out on my own now, and I realize that it's kind of like a genjutsu. In a way, Naruto has his own little dimensional space in there, and part of what my Kekkei Genkai is good for is drawing people into my genjutsu. Since I'm using the Sharingan to enter his mind, a different reality, sort of, like a genjutsu, it stands to reason that I should be able to drag somebody else in too. That sounds complicated, Naruto admitted. Do you think it's dangerous? He fidgeted with Hinata's hand, tracing the lines of her palm with one of his fingers distractedly. It wasn't worth it if there was even a slight risk. None that I can think of. At worst she might be stuck in a sort of limbo state, like being caught in a genjutsu. In that case, we can just break her out of it when we come back. Iruka-sensei, Hinata said, calling into the kitchen. The man popped his head into view, one eye raised questioningly. Do you think you could sit with us for a minute? Sure, he started, sounding curious as he entered the room carrying a washcloth. What's up? She nodded at Sasuke, who sighed and explained the plan again. By the end of it Iruka was scratching his head as if confused, but he nodded. Genjutsu was never my strongest point, but I can definitely interrupt somebody's chakra flow when I need to. I'll just watch you and break the jutsu if it looks like something went wrong, alright. He stood across the coffee table from them, watching closely and taking on a serious expression. Thanks Iruka-sensei. Naruto beamed, glad that they had backup. Time works really weird in there, so we should be out in just a few seconds. Iruka nodded, an action that Naruto forwarded to Sasuke. Alright, both of you just look at my eyes. I don't need to be staring straight into one or the others to do this right, but I'll need to draw Hinata in as I take the dive. Naruto, you can head in whenever, it's not like I need to pull you there. Naruto nodded, squeezed Hinata's hand once, and then sank into the recesses of his mind. It seemed quieter than usual when Naruto arrived within the mindscape, and a bit dimmer unless he was mistaken. Everything else looked the same, though, the giant bars, the seal placed over the cage's center, the shin-deep water, and the ceiling fading into darkness. The only oddity was the fox himself, lying with his head between massive forepaws while growling very slightly at every voluminous exhale. Oh, Hinata whispered from his left, drawing his gaze from Kurama. She stood very still, eyes a bit wide while peering around the cavernous space. Hearing about it doesn't quite hold the same weight as seeing it for myself. Welcome to the inside of Naruto's head, Sasuke said, shoving one hand into a pocket and gesturing around with the other. Dank, dull, and filled with an ill-tempered biju. Kind of weird how it's the exact opposite of your actual self, except for the dull part. Shut up, Sasuke. Naruto shoved him lightly, causing the boy to stagger a step over and curse. Kurama rumbled a slightly louder snarl then, though whether in response to the movement or something innocuous was left in question. 3 pairs of eyes turned to the slumbering beast, each projecting a different emotion. One concerned, and one cautious, and one determined. Kurama. Naruto started, approaching the cage slowly. Hey! Kurama! His shout gave rise to no response. Kurama-sama. Hinata tried tentatively, though louder than her normal tone. Oi! Stupid fox! Sasuke called, knocking a few times on one of the bars. Wake up! We need to talk to you. Sasuke! Hinata chastised, interrupted when the Kyuubi's ear twitched once, and then twice. His huge eyes began to ease open, but as soon as the red of his irises became visible they snapped open fully. With a feral roar he jerked upwards, coming to his feet and displacing a huge amount of water. Waves hit the trio standing in front of the prison, forcing them back several steps. For a few seconds Kurama let out heavy, rapid breaths, and Naruto could feel the massive heartbeats of the frenzied creature through their connection. Panic felt very, very wrong coming from him, but it was all too real. Should have just come here and insulted him in the first place, Sasuke muttered, plucking at his soaked shirt. It was only wet in here, obviously, but that didn't make the sensation any less real at the moment. What happened? The demand was sharp in Naruto's mind, the same as it likely was in his friend's. Kurama sounded confused, and furious for it. Ah! Naruto started, glancing at Sasuke and Hinata before looking back up. We were fighting that team from Kiri, remember? I screwed up and used your chakra to block a kunai. I know, I should have just used mine. It was an accident. But then I blacked out and he filled in the gaps from there, using what his friends had explained to fill in the missing pieces and going all the way up until they had returned to Iruka's. By the time he finished, the Kyuubi had calmed down somewhat, though he had turned that agitation into fury. Uchihas, he growled, stamping a paw down and sending out another cascade of water. Those damned eyes are a curse to the world. Hey, I'm right here, Sasuke said flatly. It's not Uchihas or the Sharingan that are the problem. It's the individuals who abuse their power, not the whole clan. Kurama looked like he wanted to reply to that, his lips curling up into a snarl, but Naruto inserted himself first. Do you know who it was? I don't even remember seeing the eyes, let alone a whole person. No, Kurama spat, collapsing back to the ground. He folded one paw over the other, resting his head on top in at least a semblance of normalcy. Both eyes were still narrowed in anger, however. Every Sharingan is unique, and I'd have known who it was if I had seen it before. You probably couldn't see it because you're miserable with Genjutsu. Naruto frowned, though not because of the final statement. So it isn't Itachi, or that guy who made you attack the village when I was born. Sasuke and Kakashi were ruled out by default, of course, Kurama wouldn't have excused them in any event. The fox didn't say anything, only closing his eyes for a moment, which came through their bond as a negative. So that means there's another Uchiha alive, or somebody who took a Sharingan, Hinata put in, sounding as if she were thinking aloud. She looked pensive. Is it possible that one of them was away on a mission when? During the massacre? No, Sasuke said, folding his arms and drumming his fingers on the opposite bicep. The Uchiha were put in charge of Konoha's police force, and I remember a lot of them being upset about not being assigned missions. Itachi was the only one who went out of the village regularly while in the Anbu. Who handled the bodies? Kurama asked, eyes shifting to Sasuke. The boy blinked, his features becoming a mixture of suspicion and doubt. I don't know, he admitted after a few seconds, sounding vexed. I woke up in the hospital after Itachi's Mangekyo rendered me unconscious, and from there I was interrogated for a few days. The corpses had all been removed and buried in the cemetery by the time I got out. Hearing Sasuke speak about it in such a detached manner was upsetting, but there wasn't anything to do about Itachi's slaughter, yet. They would cross that bridge when it was time, together. No point in exhuming. Chances are that, if any Sharingan were removed, those bodies in particular would be conveniently missing. He huffed, the blast of warm air causing the tails of Naruto's headband to flutter backwards, and Hinata had to tame her billowing hair. Tsunade was right to tell you not to use my chakra, though it's telling that this person decided to act when they did. What do you mean? Naruto asked. It means that the user behind the Sharingan isn't very capable with it, Sasuke reasoned, earning a slight nod from Kurama. They must be sufficiently strong to be capable of manipulating a biju, but not strong enough to do it without Kurama being closer to the surface, so to speak. So basically, Naruto began, trying to follow along. As long as I don't use Kurama's chakra, I don't have to worry about it. He didn't quite understand what caused somebody's Sharingan to be stronger than another's, or why it could do certain things under only specific conditions, but Sasuke grunted in the affirmative to indicate that he was correct. Great. So I won't, but I'd really like to figure out the source of the problem instead of just reacting to it. You do have a wise thought every so often, the QB rumbled, finally sounding a bit more like his usual sarcastic self. I'll stay alert, but it would help to have a strong sensory type on hand. You may want to keep your Byakugan active during Naruto's matches, too. Hinata nodded when she was addressed, but Naruto shook his head. Hinata, you have your own fights to worry about, and I don't want you using any extra chakra to keep an eye on me. Just ask your clan to keep a lookout during the finals, Sasuke suggested. If Hiyashi-sama and a few others split the effort, there shouldn't be any chance of something happening. That's a good idea, she replied, providing a soft smile. Like Tsunade-sama said, the more eyes we have on the lookout, the higher chance we have of catching whoever's responsible. It will be interesting to watch you struggle without my chakra, Kurama yawned, closing his eyes. I don't need to use your chakra in a one-on-one, Naruto retorted, though he knew that the fox was only being contrary for the sake of it. If I'm really struggling, I can always just summon Feng-sama to help. Kurama snorted a laugh. You'd best not summon the ancient fire just to win you a petty Chunin exam. I doubt he would object, but it's a matter of respect. You'll just have to win on your own power, which you just might be able to do. That was as close to encouragement as the stubborn beast was likely to give. He settled further, keeping both eyes closed. Now if you three don't mind, I'd like to get some sleep. Didn't you just sleep for the whole day? Naruto asked, smirking. If you can call being knocked out by a powerful genjutsu sleeping, yes, the fox drawled. Naruto winced, recalling quite vividly just how exhausted he got every time Kakashi made them practice genjutsu. Even waking up after today's incident had left him fatigued, and he hadn't technically been the one influenced. Alright, well, I'm glad you're awake again. I was starting to miss having your annoying voice in my head. Another snort was Kurama's only response. Naruto grinned and shook his head before nodding to Sasuke and Hinata. It was time to go. The apartment came back into view as soon as Naruto made the conscious effort to return. It wasn't nearly as jarring an experience as it once had been, now more like closing your eyes for a few seconds to change the view. Iruka was still standing there, blinking down at the trio curiously. Sasuke blinked out of his genjutsu, and a moment later Hinata did as well, her eyelids fluttering rapidly for several seconds as if trying to catch up to the transition. How'd it go? It's only been about 2 seconds on my end, Iruka said, and Naruto grinned. It shouldn't have been surprising that the man wasn't at all flustered by the odd time differential. Kurama woke up after Sasuke called him stupid, Naruto started, chuckling. I have a way with animals, Sasuke smirked. Anyway. He's awake, but he doesn't know who it was. It wasn't Itachi, though, or that guy the first told you about who made Kurama attack Konoha. Iruka nodded in response to Naruto's explanation, though he visibly tensed at the mention of the mysterious ninja. It had only been a recent revelation, one that they still needed to tell Kakashi about. There was just so much going on all the time that it was easy to forget little details. He said we'll just need to be careful, and that Tsunade-sama was right to tell me not to use his chakra. That was really it. Are you going to be alright without that power? Iruka asked, prompting a disgruntled look from Naruto. I know that you're strong without it, he qualified, but to me it's just more protection to ensure that you don't get hurt. It would have been disastrous if that kunai had reached you, for example. That was putting it lightly. I think it's a good thing, Hinata put in, which got Naruto blinking. A good thing. You've said a lot in the past that you don't like having to rely on that power to be strong, so this is really an opportunity to test your limits, right? I guess so, he sighed. I'm a lot slower without it, though. You'll just have to infuse more of your own chakra for taijutsu to make up for it, Sasuke put in. Your technique isn't exactly awful, and maybe you could talk to Lee or Guy about opening those gates. I tried it once, and I'm pretty convinced that it has more to do with innate ability than anything else. Kakashi-sensei can only open one, and you know how strong he is. Lee-san always says it took him years of hard work to achieve, Naruto said dubiously, though it couldn't hurt to try. Evening opening one gate would increase his strength considerably, which would translate to additional speed as a matter of course. I kinda had something else in mind, though. My taijutsu is good enough without Kurama's chakra. It's one of the things I've worked hardest on since I was little. What did you have in mind? Iruka asked. Well, I've gotta ask Jiraiya-sensei about it first, he admitted, but I'll let you know how it goes. I doubt he'll teach me what I want to learn, though. Iruka left to allow them to talk amongst themselves, deciding to get to sleep early so that he could make them breakfast in the morning. Naruto and Hinata eventually bid Sasuke goodnight, leaving him with a few blankets and a pillow from the linen closet before retiring to their own rooms. Well, at least that was where they went first. Naruto lay with his hands under his head, staring up at the ceiling in the darkness. He could feel Hinata in the bed beside him, still awake but letting him think. She was considerate like that. At times like these he might be speaking with Kurama about something or another, hearing stories about his parents, different jutsu they had mastered and things like that. But for now the fox needed to sleep. They'd have plenty of time to talk later. He preferred talking to his girlfriend more anyway. I'm gonna ask Jiraiya-sensei if he'll teach me some fuinjutsu, he said after a while, hearing Hinata shift so that she could face him. I can see why you don't think he'll teach you, she replied, and he could picture the way she was probably chewing on her lip. But I'm sure he'll be reasonable if he knows about what happened. Yeah, I just don't think he wants me using any Jikuken ninjutsu at all after that thing with the Hiraishin, and not to mention he knows that I want to loosen Kurama's seal. He made a face, which Hinata responded to by leaning over to kiss his scrunched up lips. It was easy to forget that she could see him all the time when her Byakugan was activated. Hey, that Tenzo guy is keeping a lookout these next few days, and there are probably more if I know Tsunade-sama. You don't have to keep watch too. I want to, she said simply, and Naruto had no argument for that. If their situations were reversed, he would be alert to the point of paranoia. Well, good luck watching out for an attack while you're distracted. He rolled over and proceeded to distract, as best he could, though it was more likely that the real success was diverting his own attention. Still, he did a pretty good job judging by those soft sounds she made. They always made him feel warm inside, and a bit squiggly, for some reason. Asterisk. It was still dark when Team 7 departed in the morning, and as promised Iruka had come through with a huge meal beforehand. Who didn't love fried eggs, rice, miso soup, and fresh fruit for breakfast? With a solid plan for lunch, Ichiraku, of course, they arrived at the bridge in northern Konoha with time to spare and, much to everybody's surprise, Kakashi was already there. Yo, he greeted them. I'm going to guess that you three have training plans already. Their instructor knew them too well. I'm gonna find Jiraiya-sensei and see if he'll teach me some fuinjutsu, Naruto answered, scratching behind one ear. Aren't you supposed to be the one suggesting things for us first? All three of you are highly skilled with taijutsu and a variety of ninjutsu, and while you're not very capable with genjutsu, I've at least taught you enough to recognize and break free of one. I think any training you do these next 3 days should be highly specialized based on the opponents you'll face, and I trust each of you to make that decision for your own. Naruto beamed at the compliment, Hinata smiled, and Sasuke shrugged. I want to work with you. I think I'm ready to try out the Reikiri. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at his student's assertion, but didn't offer any protest. As he had said, it was Sasuke's decision to make. Hinata, the Jonin asked, which made Naruto realize that even he didn't know what she planned on doing. He felt a bit guilty for not asking and being far too focused on himself. Anyo. For the first time in what felt like forever, Hinata pressed her fingers together in a genuine show of embarrassment. Sarutobi-sama agreed to help me train for the exam. Sasuke coughed, and Naruto's eyes went a little wide. I asked him before the last exam, thinking that we might not get too long of a break between the second and third stages. I wouldn't want to make him train me for a whole month. That sounds like so much fun. Naruto laughed, happy that she'd found somebody. Do you know what he'll be teaching you? She shook her head, blushing slightly but sharing a smile. The Sandaime was a prodigy in his youth, renowned as the god of shinobi. He trained the Sannin, if you recall, Kakashi put in, appearing overly amused. I think he's a perfect choice for you, Hinata. He also went by the Professor, a title earned for his mastery of all forms of combat. I'm confident that he'll be able to teach you something to beat these two knuckleheads in the final round. Hey, you're not supposed to play favorites, Sasuke said, clearly joking. Probably. He was the one training with their instructor, after all. It doesn't matter which of us makes it to the last fight, Naruto commented with his signature broad grin. It's gonna be great either way, and I can't wait. They all nodded, and then it was time to go. Don't forget about lunch, Naruto called back to Sasuke as he and Hinata began walking west along the path. The other boy raised a hand in recognition before he and Kakashi both vanished, probably off to some remote location to prepare in secret. Man, I really hope Sasuke doesn't figure out the Reikiri. His Chidori is already scary enough, and I have to fight him in the third round. Naruto, she chided, nudging him with her shoulder as they walked. Yeah, I know, overconfidence. Well yes, that, she laughed, but you should hope that Sasuke grows stronger just as you and I will. You did say that it doesn't matter who gets to the final round, remember? Yeah, but, he started, knowing that a flush was coming on. I still like to win. She nudged him again, slipping a hand into his at the same time. You're incorrigible, Uzumaki Naruto. Encourageable. That sounded like a funny thing to be in light of what he had just said, but Hinata's giggle signaled that it might not be so bad. I guess I can be sometimes, huh? They walked and kept up conversation all the way to the academy, above which towered the Hokage's office. Hiruzen had retired to his clan's humble estate just north of here, and had agreed to meet Hinata for tea early this morning to discuss plans for the next few days. She was quieter than usual, a clear indicator that nervousness had begun to creep in. Good luck, Hinata, he said quietly, pulling her into a tight hug. You're gonna do great. She returned the embrace with equal fervor before stepping back, smiling at him. Thank you, Naruto. I want to know what you'll be learning with Jiraiya-sama, so don't forget about lunch. He drew back a corner of his lips and raised an eyebrow, silently asking, are you crazy? Me, missing lunch. She giggled again. He loved hearing that sound. Naruto stretched and sighed after Hinata was out of sight, turning eastward to look down the long street that eventually led straight out of Konoha. The sun was finally peaking above the horizon, which meant that people would soon be out and about on daily chores and errands. He didn't really want to be around for that. People hadn't been looking too kindly at him since the last exams. Kuchio's no jutsu. He placed a hand on the ground, blossoming jutsu shiki outward just before the telltale cloud of smoke birthed Huang into being. The phoenix sang a sound of delight and swooped over, alighting on his shoulder and nuzzling near his jaw. Hey, nice to see you too, Huang-san. I'm gonna need your company for a few days, I think. For now, though, can you help me find Jiraiya-sensei again? It's time to get to work. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.